Chapter 1304. The End of the Sea of Bitterness. Father, how long will it take to comprehend the law of wind? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. Zhuowen was taken aback for a moment before replying. This is the first time your father has come into contact with the law of wind. Although I have a ready-made law of Saint runes in my possession, it will still take some time to comprehend and refine them into my body. Zhuowen, do you have other matters to attend to? To tell you the truth, Zhuowen sighed softly and told his father about Mu Qinxue, causing a strange expression to appear on his face. Mu Qinxue, the current holy maiden of the Burning Heaven sect? At this point, Zhuo Xiaotian suddenly burst into laughter. We father and son are really fated to meet each other. The other half we found is actually the saintess of the Burning Heaven sect. Your mother is the saintess of the previous generation, and your partner is actually the saintess of this generation. Zhuowen spread his hands and said helplessly, perhaps it's an ill-fated relationship. It is indeed an ill-fated relationship. Boy, you can't let the Burning Heaven sect know about your feelings for that little girl. Otherwise it will be very troublesome. Your father is a good example, Zhuo Xiaotian said with a sigh. Zhuowen fell silent, but soon after, he suddenly smiled and said, Father, I don't agree with your point of view. Since I like Mu Qinxue, and Mu Qinxue likes me, we are mutually in love. In the future, I will lead Ryuka to rise, destroy the Blue Dragon Hall, and openly marry Mu Qinxue. So what if the Burning Heaven sect knows about our feelings? I will prove to the Burning Heaven sect that I, Zhuowen, am qualified to marry her. Staring at the youth in front of him, Zhuo Xiaotian's eyes were slightly moved, but he laughed and said, Good, you're right. There's no need to hide things like feelings. Since both of you love each other, then be together. I believe that with your talent, you can definitely lead Ryuka to glory. When that time comes, I'm afraid that the Burning Heaven sect will try to curry favor with you. Father, I heard that Mother is trapped in the Burning Heaven sect's Burning Flame Pagoda. I wonder if she is in danger. Perhaps thinking of something, Zhuowen's gaze suddenly focused on Zhuo Xiaotian as he asked cautiously. The smile on Zhuo Xiaotian's face stiffened, and a touch of sadness appeared in his eyes. Xiao shouldn't be in any danger, because she is the daughter of the current sect master. However, she might suffer because of me. Zhuowen's pupil shrank and he said in a deep voice, Father, as long as you become an invincible emperor lord, and then advance to a quasi-holy, or even a sage, I don't believe that the Burning Heaven sect's sect master won't recognize you. Zhuowen shook his head and said, Zhuowen, it's not that easy. Becoming a sage is more difficult than becoming an emperor realm expert. Moreover, with the strength of the Burning Heaven sect, they definitely have more than one sage. Even if I become a sage, the sect master won't necessarily recognize me. But even if I have to snatch Xiao, I will snatch her back. At that time, our family of 3 can have a good reunion. Oh right, how is your grandfather? Zhuo Xiaotian suddenly asked, perhaps thinking of something. Grandfather is in the Azure Dragon Hall. We plan to cultivate Ryuka forces there. Zhuowen replied softly. Zhuo Xiaotian nodded. Regarding the matter of the Azure Dragon Hall, Zhuowen had told him before. Even he could not help but envy Zhuowen's luck in his heart. To actually be able to profit from a disaster and obtain the inheritance of a saint, this luck could be said to be extremely heaven-defying. Does your main body plan to enter the 9th Netherworld realm now? Zhuo Xiaotian asked again. However, Zhuowen hesitated. Although he was worried about Mu Qinxue, he wanted to stay here and protect his father. After he completely comprehended the law of sacred runes and broke through to the invincible emperor realm, he would be able to break through the array. Looking at you, you should still be worried about your little lover. Don't worry about me, go to the 9th Netherworld realm. After I successfully break through the array, I will go to the inner court to find you. Zhuo Xiaotian laughed and said rather heroically. Zhuowen looked at Zhuo Xiaotian gratefully and nodded solemnly. Thank you, father. But be careful on the road. Your father will come to find you soon. When the time comes, I will be your backer. Zhuo Xiaotian said straightforwardly. Okay. Zhuowen nodded solemnly. Then, he took a step into the air and disappeared from the sky above the imperial city, like an arrow that had left the bow. Xiao He, on the other hand, transformed into a black beam of light, and entered Zhuo Wen's body. White brow, protect my father well. When my father escapes, he may give you a good fortune. After Zhuo Wen disappeared, his voice echoed between heaven and earth. White brow, who was floating not far away, nodded vigorously and bowed slightly in the direction that Zhuo Wen left. With Zhuo Wen's current speed, it naturally didn't take much time to return to Auspicious Spirit Island. However, when he returned to Auspicious Spirit Island, he heard a piece of bad news. Yao Dai had passed away 3 days ago. Master Aunt Yao, she woo woo woo. When he returned to the pavilion where Wu Dai and Yao Dai were, Wu Dai threw herself into Zhuo Wen's arms and cried nonstop. Looking at Wu Dai's delicate appearance, a trace of pity rose in Zhuo Wen's heart. At this moment, close to 1,000 demon soldiers were kneeling on the ground outside the pavilion. Their eyes were filled with sorrow as they respectfully sent off old Wang. Wu Dai, you're already a 4th-level demon emperor? Patting Wu Dai's head, Zhuo Wen suddenly realized something. His right hand suddenly froze as he looked at Wu Dai with a strange expression. Wu Dai's emotions also stabilized, but the rim of her eyes was still a little red. She said in a low voice, before Aunt Yao passed away, she passed on all her demon power to me. That's why I was able to break through to the 4th-level demon emperor in such a short time. I see. Zhuo Wen murmured with a look of understanding. Master, before Aunt Yao passed away, her only wish was for me to enter the demon nether realm in the 9 netherworld realm. She hoped that I could join the demon god palace in the demon nether realm. But Speaking until here, Wu Dai bit her lower lip with her pearly white teeth. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on Zhuo Wen, her face full of grievance and reluctance. Looking at Wu Dai's appearance, Zhuo Wen naturally guessed what she was thinking. She probably couldn't bear to part with him. After all, although he was going to the 9 netherworld realm, he was going to the divine nether realm in the inner court. However, he knew about the demon nether realm. There was an extremely vast continent inside called the demon domain. That continent was filled with demon clan members. It was a paradise for demon clan members. Moreover, it was said that if a demon emperor entered the demon nether realm to cultivate, his cultivation speed would be much faster than outside. This was because the air in the demon nether realm was not filled with yuan qi, but demon qi. Demon qi could be directly absorbed by demon emperors and transformed into demon power. Although demon emperors could also use yuan qi to transform it into demon power, the process was much less efficient than absorbing demon qi. Therefore, Wu Dai entering the demon nether realm to cultivate was undoubtedly a wise decision. This was also Wu Dai's long-cherished wish. Zhuo Wen rubbed Wu Dai's head and smiled. Since this is Wu Dai's long-cherished wish, you should follow her into the demon nether realm. That place is indeed suitable for demon emperors to cultivate. When you have some accomplishments, we will naturally meet again. Perhaps when we meet again, it will be you protecting me. Wu Dai curled her lips. However, she also knew that Zhuo Wen was right. The demon nether realm was indeed very suitable for her to cultivate. If she still followed Zhuo Wen into the divine nether realm, she was afraid that she would be pulled further and further away from Zhuo Wen. When that time came, she would probably become a burden to Zhuo Wen. Wu Dai was very clear about Zhuo Wen's talent. If she didn't work hard to improve herself, she wouldn't have the qualifications to stand beside Zhuo Wen when the time came. By the way, this is the inner core of a soaring dragon snake. Take it and refine it when you have time. It will be quite beneficial to you. Zhuo Wen took out an inner core from his spirit ring and handed it to Wu Dai with a smile. Wu Dai waved her jade-like hand and held it in her palm. A sweet smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. Her previous depression instantly vanished as she sweetly said, Master is still the best. Hee hee. We're going to the 9 nether realm now. By the way, what about these demon soldiers? Withdrawing his right hand, Zhuo Wen suddenly pointed at the 1,000 demon soldiers behind him and turned his head to ask. Naturally, they have to carry it with them. Aunt Yao gave me this before. As Wu Dai spoke, she extended her jade-like hand and took out a bull horn. The surface of the bull horn was engraved with complicated runes. It should be a fairly powerful emperor artifact. Wu Dai formed a seal with her right hand. Suddenly, spatial energy gushed out from the tip of the bull horn. Shortly after, The 1,000 demon soldiers outside disappeared on the spot. They turned into specks of light and entered the bullhorn. Zhuowen looked at the bullhorn in Wu Dai's hand in amazement. It seemed that this bullhorn should be a spatial emperor artifact. It was actually able to carry over 1,000 demon soldiers. It was quite rare. After doing all this, Zhuowen chatted with Grandmaster Lan Miao for a while. Then, he took Wu Dai and left the Auspicious God Island on the Sun Moon Shuttle. After Zhuowen left the Auspicious God Island with Wu Dai, at the end of the Sea of Misery, a huge sailboat swept past the clouds. On the surface of the sea at the end of the Sea of Misery, there were 9 stone tablets floating. Each stone tablet was several thousand feet in size. They stood on the surface of the sea, towering between the heavens and the earth. They looked extremely majestic. On each of the 9 stone steels, there were words written on them. The first stone steel wrote Dragon Underworld. The second stone steel wrote Divine Underworld, and so on. The 9th stone steel wrote Night Underworld. Behind each stone tablet, there was a corresponding location of a netherworld, which was the entrance to the netherworld. The cloud sail stopped in front of the 9 stone tablets. Everyone on the deck stared at the 9 stone tablets with shock in their eyes. It was the first time that they had seen such a huge stone tablet. This is the end of the Sea of Misery. The area is extremely hidden. If you have not entered the 9 netherworld realm, you will definitely not be able to find this sea area and these 9 huge stone tablets. Zhuowen, you can mark this place properly. When your real body comes over, you will not get lost. Standing at the head of the deck, Moyen Bai Yan's indifferent voice rang out as he explained the 9 stone tablets in front of everyone. The Sea of Misery is really big. The cloud sail is so fast, but it still took 2 months. Buddha Zhuowen stared at the 9 stone tablets and muttered in a low voice. This time, we are entering the divine netherworld realm. There is a spatial teleportation array in these stone tablets. When we get close to these stone tablets, we will be teleported into the divine netherworld realm. However, during the process of entering, there will be a powerful spatial tearing force. If martial artists below the Emperor realm enter, they will definitely die. So if your strength is below the Emperor realm, please take care of those around you. Chapter 1305. Divine Nether Realm. The moment it entered the stone tablet, the cloud-piercing sail actually shook violently, causing everyone on the deck to stagger. Fortunately, none of them were ordinary people, so they quickly recovered. What a strong tearing force! On the deck, Buddha Zhuowen instantly noticed the tearing force around his body. His Buddha avatar's body had already reached the level of immortality. Although the tearing force was strong, when it landed on his body, it did not cause him to be harmed in the slightest. On the other hand, the others all released their origin energy, forming a protective barrier around their bodies, resisting the powerful tearing force that surged towards them. Everyone hold on for a while. This teleportation process won't take long. Moyen Bai Yan cautiously instructed. Sure enough, after the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the tearing force around them completely disappeared. Everyone only felt their vision change, and they discovered that the cloud-piercing sail was actually floating on top of a rather steep cliff. This cliff was not high, and at the bottom of the cliff, there was a group of people gathered. The arrival of the cloud-piercing sail naturally attracted the attention of this group of people, but they only took a glance and no longer paid attention to it. This was because ships would often pass by the entrance of the divine nether realm, so they were not surprised. That is, Buddha Zhuowen and the rest quickly noticed that there was an extremely large stone arch in front of them. At this moment, in front of the stone arch, there were dozens of lines, and each line had nearly 1,000 people like a long dragon. There are actually 3 suns. Suddenly Lu Hantian's surprised voice resounded. It attracted the attention of the other people on the deck. They raised their heads and saw that there were 3 huge suns floating in the azure sky. They were emitting a scorching heat, which made everyone's body feel hot and dry. The divine nether realm is a small world created by the combined efforts of the saints who lived there. Some of the natural landscapes inside were created with the aesthetics of the saints. It's not strange for there to be 3 suns. Moyen Bai Yan explained with a smile. As the principal of the Divine Academy's outer court, He had naturally entered before, so his understanding of the divine nether realm was naturally much better than everyone else. That stone arch is a divine gate, the entrance to the divine nether realm. However, you have to pay a certain amount of spirit stones to enter. Mo Yen Bai Yen explained once again. How many spirit stones do you need? Zhuowen asked curiously. 1 top-grade spirit stone per person. Mo Yen Bai Yen shrugged his shoulders and said, so expensive. As soon as this was said, everyone looked at each other. Most of them did not have top-grade spirit stones on them, so this became a problem for them. Don't worry, I have enough top-level spirit stones with me. Just follow me when the time comes. Mo Yen Bai Yen smiled. With a wave of his sleeve, he stored the cloud-piercing sail into his spirit ring. Soon after, he led everyone to choose a team and waited silently. There were dozens of guards standing at the gate. Each of them wore a special uniform. Zhuowen noticed that they were all mid-level emperors. The guards at the gate were also mid-level emperors. The Nine Nether Realm was indeed worthy of being the holy land of martial Dao in the Eastern Land. The number of experts inside would probably far exceed everyone's expectations. After getting off the cloud-piercing sail, the demon Dao avatar had already turned into a demon eye and hid in Zhuowen's body. In the process of waiting, Zhuowen silently comprehended the mysteries of the Buddha and demon energies, trying to understand the reason why the two were incompatible. During the 2 months on the cloud-piercing sail, Zhuowen had tried to combine the Buddha and demon energies to create a powerful Buddha and demon energies. However, it ended in failure. Although he failed, Zhuowen had some gains. He discovered that if he combined a small amount of Buddha and demon energies, he could create a palm-sized Buddha and demon lotus. However, its power was extremely limited, not even comparable to the full power attack of his demon Dao avatar. However, Zhuowen was unwilling to give up. He knew that if he combined all the Buddha and demon energies of his demon Dao avatar and demon Dao avatar, the power produced would definitely be earth-shattering. However, he did not have the ability to do so. Back then, how did the fighting Buddha demon saint combine these two completely different types of energy and create the power of Buddha and demon? The more he comprehended the essence of the two energies, the more terrifying Zhuowen felt that the fighting Buddha demon saint was. To be able to go against common sense and combine Buddha and demon Dao was an extremely crazy thing. Moreover, the fighting Buddha demon saint was able to accomplish such a crazy thing. Zhuowen could not help but admire him. The team advanced in an orderly manner. After about 4 hours, it was Mo Yen and Bai Yan's turn. Mo Yen and Bai Yan paid 12 pieces of top-grade spirit stones. Although Mo Yen and Bai Yan were elegant, Zhuowen could keenly sense that the corners of Mo Yen and Bai Yan's eyes were slightly twitching. Obviously, 12 pieces of top-grade spirit stones were quite a large expense for Mo Yen and Bai Yan. Let's go in. After the guard received the spirit stones, he said and no longer paid any attention to Mo Yen and Bai Yan's group. Let's go. After passing through the divine gate, everyone realized that the scenery on the other side of the divine gate was completely different. They were standing on a stone platform that was dozens of feet wide. This stone platform was suspended above the clouds. A gentle breeze blew past and swept past their faces, giving them a numb feeling. What a vast continent! Is the continent below the divine nether realm? Standing on the edge of the stone platform, Zhuowen looked down. There were valleys with birds chirping and flowers fragrant. There were tall and straight mountain peaks that were like pine trees. There were picturesque plains and densely packed cities on the ground. Moreover, everyone also noticed that on the vast land below, there was a river that was as wide as a python. It extended from one end of the continent to the other end. It actually divided the entire continent into two. At a glance, it looked like a Taiji diagram. That river is the Divine River. The Divine River is the most famous scenery in the Divine Nether Realm. This Divine River has the effect of curing hundreds of poisons. Moreover, after drinking it, it can strengthen the physique of an ordinary human. It also has the effect of prolonging one's life. However, these effects are not too obvious for Imperial Power Realm warriors. Mo Yen and Bai Yan pointed at the huge river below and explained with a smile. This divine river actually has such an effect. No wonder the warriors in the ninth netherworld realm are generally stronger than those in the outside world. I'm afraid it has something to do with the special geographical location of the ninth netherworld realm. Lu Hantian stared at the divine river with a sharp light in his eyes. Although this divine river did not have much of an effect on the imperial power realm, the humans who were born in the divine nether realm, if they bathed in the divine river from a young age, and drank the water of the divine river as they grew up, regardless of physique or aptitude, they would far surpass many warriors in the outside world. After all, the starting line of the warriors in the ninth netherworld realm was much higher than that of the outside world. At the end of the divine river is the endless mountain range. That mountain range is the territory of the divine nether academy. Within the endless mountain range, there are 9 huge mountain peaks. You should have noticed them, right? Moyen and Baiyan pointed at the distance. Zhuowen and the rest could see the endless mountain range at the end of the divine river. Just as Moyen and Baiyan had said, there were 9 towering mountain peaks within the mountain range. These 9 mountain peaks were extremely eye-catching, because if one looked carefully, one could see that these 9 mountain peaks did not appear to be naturally formed. Instead, they appeared to be man-made. These 9 mountain peaks are the core buildings of the inner academy. Every mountain peak represents a great power within the inner academy. The sky capital peak that Elder Wuxia is at is one of these 9 mountain peaks. When Elder Wuxia was mentioned, there was a slight fluctuation in Moyen and Baiyan's eyes. If Elder Wuxia had not risked his life to use a secret technique, he would not have been able to escape from Mu Feng's evil clutches. Other than the sky capital peak, what are the other 8 mountain peaks called? Jianan, who had a lively character, asked with great interest. The other 8 mountain peaks are the mysterious underworld peak, Yangming Peak, mysterious Yuan Peak, Great Void Peak, Taichung Peak, Great Jade Peak, Hidden Sword Peak and Divine Devil Peak. These 8 mountain peaks, and the sky capital peak, are the central area of the entire inner academy. It is also the gathering place of the inner academy's disciples. Before Moyen and Baiyan could open their mouths, Moyen Wuxiang, who was standing beside them, took the initiative to speak. His clear and melodious voice was like that of an oriole. Of course, other than the 9 mountain peaks of the inner academy, there is another building that is extremely famous. It is the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. It is said that the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace contains the core origin of the holy symbol of ice and fire. Its power is boundless and its aura is monstrous. Many disciples of the inner academy use the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace to cultivate. Its nature is similar to the cultivation tower of the outer academy. However, the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is many times more helpful to cultivation than the cultivation tower. When Moyen Wuxiang said this, Zhuowen, who was not far away, gradually narrowed his eyes. He thought to himself, the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace? When he had obtained the trace of origin of the holy symbol of Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, the symbol spirit had suddenly appeared and set a promise with him of 10 years. It wanted him to reach the inner academy of Fine Deity Academy within 10 years and pass the first 8 levels of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. At that time, the symbol spirit would pull him into the deepest level of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace and obtain the real holy symbol of ice and fire. Moreover, there was still a few years before the 10 years, so Zhuowen was not in a hurry. Let's go. Let's enter the inner academy's sky capital peak first. I still have to give the identity token of Elder Wuxia to the sky capital peak's old man Tiandu. After all, Elder Wuxia died in the outer academy, so I have to give the sky capital peak an explanation. Moyen Baiyan waved his sleeves and took out the sky-piercing sail again. He led the group across the entire continent and swept toward the end of the Divine River. Not long after Moyen Baiyan and the others left, a black cloud rapidly swept over in front of the 9 huge stone tablets at the end of the bitter sea and stopped in front of the tablets. The black cloud slowly wriggled and revealed a tall and straight figure. This person's eyes were pitch black as he stared at the first tablet of the Dragon Wasteland. He sneered and said, "Let's enter the Dragon Wasteland first." With Mu Feng's status, I should be able to obtain a high position in the Blue Dragon Hall soon. As long as I release Zhuowen's news, the Blue Dragon Hall will naturally help me get rid of that little bastard. Hehe. Chapter 1306. Hall Master. The scenery of the Dragon Wasteland was completely different from that of the Divine Wasteland. It was similarly a huge small world, with plains, mountains, rivers, and many cities. However, it was not the sun that was suspended in the sky above the Dragon Wasteland. Instead, it was 100,000 feet large green dragon. Green light flickered in this world, dyeing it green, causing it to appear extremely strange. At the center of the Dragon Wasteland was an extremely huge building complex. Every single building was in the shape of a dragon, representing a huge dragon. The interior was arranged in a picturesque manner, with hundreds and thousands of buildings scattered all over. Every single one of them was in the shape of a dragon, appearing as though 10,000 dragons had emerged from the sea. It was an extremely spectacular sight. At the center of the building complex was an extremely huge stone dragon. This stone dragon roared towards the sky. Its dragon scales were distinct, arranged in a picturesque manner, and appeared extremely lifelike. If one were to carefully observe it, one would discover that this stone dragon contained a huge palace. This palace was the Blue Dragon Hall, the overlord faction of the Dragon Wasteland. Swoosh! Mu Feng's speed was extremely quick, and he landed in front of this palace. There were 2 guards in green armor at the entrance of the palace. When Mu Feng approached, the 2 of them subconsciously blocked him outside. I am the 10th Green Dragon Envoy Feng Mu. Do the 2 of you dare to stop me? Mu Feng took out his identity token and spoke in an indifferent voice. The 2 guards glanced at the identity token before bowing and saying, "So it's Lord Green Dragon Envoy. Please forgive us for our earlier offense." Mu Feng nodded before keeping his identity token. Soon after, he entered the palace. 10th brother. Not long after Mu Feng entered the palace, a surprised voice was transmitted from his side. Mu Feng turned his head to look, and immediately saw 2 figures walking over from his left side. One of the 2 figures was a hunchbacked, white-haired old man, while the other was a fair-faced young man. The only similarity was that the auras from these 2 people were extremely frightening. They were even stronger than the 8th Green Dragon Envoy that Mu Feng had summoned back then. The black chi in Mu Feng's eyes slowly withdrew, as a slight smile appeared from the corners of his mouth. It's actually 6th brother and 7th brother. From Mu Feng's words, one could tell that these 2 were likely the 6th and 7th Green Dragon Envoy. Old 10, it's been a long time since you left the Dragon Wasteland. I really don't know what you were doing when you left. The stooped, white-haired old man narrowed his eyes and spoke in a sinister tone. This old man was the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy, while the young man beside him was the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy. When the 2 of them saw Mu Feng, they didn't show any enthusiasm. Instead, they were somewhat eccentric. Mu Feng's eyes narrowed slightly, before he replied with a faint smile. 6th brother, you must be joking. During this period of time, I've also been traveling outside to see if I can obtain some opportunities and fortuitous encounters. Oh, then old 10, did you obtain an opportunity? The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy laughed. There was, but it was all for naught in the end. When he said those words, Mu Feng revealed an expression of pity. His appearance naturally attracted the interest of the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy and the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy. Old 10, tell me about it. The 7th Azure Dragon Envoy asked curiously. Mu Feng's eyes flickered as he recounted the events that had happened in the Sea of Misery. He spoke about the Emperor's tomb, the Arcana Saint Master's inheritance, and the death of the 8th Azure Dragon Envoy. Old 8 is dead. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy and the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy looked at each other. Their expressions immediately became ugly. Although the 10 great Azure Dragon Envoys of the Blue Dragon Hall were all on their own, there were naturally good and bad relationships between them. The 6th, 7th, and 8th Azure Dragon Envoys were usually very close. Although they weren't like blood brothers, they weren't far off. Now that they heard that the 8th Azure Dragon Envoy had actually died, their expressions naturally became ugly. That's right. Old 8th was killed by that Zhuo. because that fellow had obtained the inheritance of the emperor's tomb's master. Moreover, he had also obtained a profound saint artifact from within. It was precisely by relying on that profound saint artifact that Zhuowen was able to catch old Eighth off guard and kill him. Mu Feng said meaningfully. The inheritance of an arcana saint master, and a profound saint artifact? The sixth and seventh Azure Dragon envoys exclaimed in a low voice. Soon after, a trace of greed appeared in their eyes. Profound saint artifacts were extremely precious items to them. Seeing the greed in their eyes, a trace of a smile appeared at the corner of Mu Feng's mouth. He only said that Zhuowen possessed a profound saint artifact. However, he didn't say that the profound saint artifact was actually severely damaged. His goal was to arouse the greed of the two. Moreover, that Zhuowen is a Ryuka descendant. If I'm not wrong, the dragon soul that has awakened within his body should be a grade 9 dragon soul. Mu Feng suddenly said in a serious tone. When these words were spoken, the pupils of the sixth and seventh Azure Dragon envoys shrank as they stared at Mu Feng. Only then did the sixth Azure Dragon envoy say in a somewhat serious tone, "Old Ten, you're not speaking nonsense, right? That Zhuowen is really a Ryuka descendant, and even possesses a grade 9 dragon soul." Both of them knew how terrifying a grade 9 dragon soul was. Because 10,000 years ago, every patriarch of the Ryuka Hall had awakened a grade 9 dragon soul. Every patriarch of the Ryuka Hall was basically a world-shaking figure. 10,000 years ago, a grade 9 dragon soul actually represented a peerless genius. If they didn't fall, they would definitely become an extremely dazzling existence in the entire Eastern lands, or even the entire continent. Even their Blue Dragon Hall Master's dragon soul had not reached grade 9. It was merely grade 8. However, this was already dazzling enough. Within the same cultivation level, there were very few cultivators who could be a match for their Blue Dragon Hall Master. Now that their Blue Dragon Hall Master had reached the Saint Realm, his battle prowess was even more terrifying. In one fell swoop, he had developed the Blue Dragon Hall Master into the #1 force in the 9 Netherworld realm. Moreover, among all the saints in the 9 Netherworld realm, the strength of the Blue Dragon Hall Master was undeniably the strongest. This matter needs to be reported to the Hall Master. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy also understood the seriousness of this matter. After saying those words, he led the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy towards the depths of the large hall, while Mu Feng followed behind with a smile. In the depths of the Blue Dragon Hall, there was actually a huge hall. Strangely, there were stars in the night sky above the hall. Between those stars, there were many dragon shadows lingering, making it look extremely majestic. At the center of the hall, there was a red carpet. At the end of the red carpet, there was a flight of stairs. At the top of the stairs, there was a dragon-shaped throne. An imposing figure was faintly discernible as he quietly sat on the throne. Although the light in the hall was rather bright, a shadow had strangely appeared in front of this person, covering his face and making it impossible to see his appearance. Hall Master, the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon envoys, and Mu Feng all lowered their heads and respectfully greeted. The soul jade of the 8th Azure Dragon envoy has shattered. A low and deep voice resounded throughout the entire hall, causing people to be unable to determine where the voice had come from. The 6th and 7th Azure Dragon envoys looked to each other, before nodding their heads and saying, "What the Hall Master said is correct. The 8th Azure Dragon envoy has indeed died. Tell me about it." The Hall Master said indifferently, "Old Ten, you tell me." The 6th Azure Dragon envoy suddenly looked towards Mu Feng and said. Mu Feng did not refuse. Nodding his head, he explained everything that had happened in the Emperor's tomb. Naturally, he would not tell them about the real Mu Feng's death, and the fact that the heaven insect's consciousness had taken over his body. A Ryuka descendant. Grade 9 Dragon Soul? Back then, when this child had just advanced to the Emperor realm, he already possessed the strength to fight against a 7th-layer Emperor? After hearing Mu Feng's words, the Hall Master, who was originally as calm as an ancient well, gently tapped his right hand on the armrest. No one knew exactly what he was thinking at this moment. Lord Hall Master, that Zhuowen is a Ryuka descendant, and has even awakened a grade 9 dragon soul. This child cannot be allowed to live. Mu Feng cupped his hands and said in a serious tone. I naturally know about this matter. From what you've said, that Zhuowen had entered the Divine Spectre Academy's outer academy. Now that he has already advanced to the Emperor realm, I'm afraid that he has the qualifications to enter the inner academy. In other words, that Zhuowen should have already entered the Divine Spectre realm's inner academy. The Hall Master suddenly said in an indifferent tone. What does the Hall Master mean? Mu Feng asked in a somewhat astonished tone. The Hall Master's voice rang out once again. That Zhuowen actually has a grade 9 dragon soul. Don't spread this matter. Even if this child enters the inner academy, he will only be an ordinary official disciple, and will not be valued by the inner academy. If we casually charge him with a crime and directly capture him, I believe that the Divine Spectre Academy will not fall out with us over a single disciple. 6th and 7th Azure Dragon Envoy. This time, the two of you will head to the Divine Spectre realm and capture that Zhuowen for me. Upon hearing this, the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon Envoy were not shocked, but instead delighted. From their point of view, capturing that Zhuowen would definitely be an easy task. After all, that Zhuowen had obtained quite a few good things in the Emperor's tomb, including profound saint artifacts. While capturing that Zhuowen, the two of them would also be able to plunder some good things from his body. The two of you should make your preparations, after which, you will head to the Divine Spectre realm. The Hall Master said in an indifferent tone. Yes. The two of them cupped their hands, bowed and walked out. Very quickly, only Mu Feng and the Hall Master remained in the hall. Do you know why I asked you to stay? The Hall Master asked in a deep voice. Mu Feng's eyes flickered, and the corners of his mouth turned somewhat unnatural as he said, This subordinate does not know. The Hall Master took a deep look at Mu Feng and said, Actually, Mu Feng's soul jade has also shattered. In other words, Mu Feng's soul has already vanished into thin air. However, you have now appeared in front of me. Speaking until here, Mu Feng immediately fell into silence. His eyes slowly narrowed, and the muscles in his entire body tensed up, while his pupils gradually turned pitch black. The Emperor's tomb exists in the Sea of Misery. Do you really think that this Hall Master does not know anything about it? There should be a heavenly insect clone that came from the Central Plains sealed in that Emperor's tomb. And the owner of that Emperor's tomb is also from the Central Plains. The Hall Master continued to speak, minding his own business. You actually know about it. Then with your strength, obtaining the inheritance of the Emperor's tomb should not be easy, right? Why don't you take action? Mu Feng said in a low voice. Chapter 1307. Qinglongzi Haha. The saints of the eastern lands are all in the 9 Netherworld realm. The 9 Netherworld realm doesn't only have the Dragon Netherworld realm, but there are also 8 other Netherworld realms. However, the other saints haven't made a move yet, the Hall Master said indifferently. Sky Insect narrowed his eyes. He also realized that something was wrong. The Emperor's tomb was so famous in the Bitter Sea that it was impossible for the cultivators of the 9 Netherworld realm to not know about it. However, the cultivators of the 9 Netherworld realm rarely came out to explore the Emperor's tomb. He knew that with the strength of a saint, if they entered the Emperor's tomb, they could obtain the inheritance of the Baifeng, and even control such a huge structure like the Emperor's tomb. However, such a thing had not happened in the past 1,000 years. Why? Sky Insect was still puzzled. The Hall Master, who was hiding in the shadows, laughed. This was the first time he had laughed. His laughter was like an owl, cold and shrill. It was extremely ear-piercing. The Primal Chaos Temple has a huge influence in the Central Lands. Although a profound Saint Master is not very important to the Primal Chaos Temple, his sudden disappearance naturally attracted the attention of the people inside. So the Primal Chaos Temple sent people to the Eastern Lands to find that old fellow Baifeng. Sky Insect asked in a deep voice. The Hall Master did not admit or deny it. He said indifferently, It should be said that the Primal Chaos Temple sent 4 people to the Eastern Lands, the Southern Barbarian Lands, the Western regions, and the Northern Lands respectively. The one who was sent to the eastern lands was also a profound Saint Master. Coincidentally, the profound Saint Master, who came to the eastern lands, entered the 9 Netherworld realm as soon as he arrived. He did not know about the Emperor's tomb in the Bitter Sea. Although the saints of the 9 Netherworld realm have discovered the extraordinariness of the Emperor's tomb, no one acted rashly because of the Primal Chaos Temple's people. Sky Insect nodded and said with fear, "Then where is that profound Saint Master now? In your Dragon Netherworld realm?" The Hall Master shook his head and said, "That profound Saint Master's whereabouts are extremely mysterious. Furthermore, he has many formation Dao techniques. I do not know his exact whereabouts. However, I am the Dragon Netherworld realm's master. If that Saint Master were to appear in the Netherworld realm, I would naturally know. However, I have not sensed his presence." Tiangu relaxed a little when he heard this. The Primal Chaos Divine Temple had something that was specially designed to deal with him. If he were to meet the Xian Saint Master, he would definitely be forcefully sealed in his current state, and he would not be able to escape. It's because of the existence of the profound Saint Master that you didn't take action to take down the Emperor's tomb? Sky Insect still didn't quite believe it. That's one of the reasons. Also, the owner of the Emperor's tomb is only a profound Saint Master. Even if I seize the Emperor's tomb, it won't be of much benefit to me, who is also a saint. Moreover, if the Primal Chaos Temple finds out, it will be difficult to deal with. Therefore, the Emperor's tomb is not worthy of me fighting for. Of course, it would be best if my subordinates could seize it. The Palace Master's voice was extremely calm. Then why are you telling me all this now? Celestial Worm asked coldly. The Hall Master suddenly smiled and said, "The Primal Chaos Temple is an extremely large organization in the Central Plains. Even my Blue Dragon Hall is probably extremely insignificant before it. However, something that the Primal Chaos Temple has sealed with such caution probably isn't simple at all. I just want to cooperate with you. What do you think?" Cooperation? How do you want to cooperate? Tiangu's black chi slowly receded as he stared at the Palace Master with his pitch-black eyes. "You should be thinking of recovering your strength, right? I can help you with that. However, after you recover your strength, you have to help my Blue Dragon Hall unify the 9th Netherworld realm." At this point, the Palace Master's voice, which was originally as calm as an ancient well, fluctuated slightly. There was even a trace of suppressed excitement. "Unify the 9th Netherworld realm? Isn't your Blue Dragon Hall already the strongest organization in the 9th Netherworld realm?" Tiangu asked in confusion. However, the Palace Master shook his head and said, "Just as you said, although the Blue Dragon Hall is the strongest in the 9th Netherworld realm, it is still far from being able to completely suppress the other 8 Netherworld realms. Just the Divine Netherworld realm alone isn't something that my Dragon Netherworld realm can take down. We can only suppress it." The Divine Netherworld realm was the closest organization in the 9th Netherworld realm to the Dragon Netherworld realm. Furthermore, the Divine Academy's inner court was filled with geniuses. They were already a threat to the Dragon Netherworld realm, so the Blue Dragon Hall Master naturally didn't want to see the Divine Academy grow, nor did he want the other Netherworld realms to threaten his position as the overlord of the Dragon Netherworld realm. If he wanted to do that, he could only use thunderous methods to make the other 8 Netherworld realms submit to the Dragon Netherworld realm. However, the Dragon Netherworld realm couldn't do that yet. However, Tiangu's arrival gave the Blue Dragon Hall Master hope, so he decisively proposed a cooperation. However, Tiangu sneered and said, "You mean to say that you want me to be your hired thug? If you want to borrow my power, I'm naturally willing. However, you and the entire Dragon Netherworld realm must listen to me." Tiangu was in existence with absolute pride. How could he possibly listen to someone else's orders, let alone be someone else's hired thug? "Looks like you don't know the situation you're in." The Hall Master's voice turned cold. "Qing Longzi, wake this guy up." A frightening aura rushed out from deep within the large hall after these words were spoken. In an instant, the air in the entire large hall stilled. A wave of oppressive pressure, which was just like countless mountains, appeared extremely heavy and vast. Tiangu's eyes turned cold. Soon after, he saw a corridor appear behind the throne in front of him. A tall figure walked out from the dim corridor step by step. With every step that the figure took, a clear dragon roar sounded. It was as if countless dragon roars and tiger roars were contained under his footsteps. Moreover, the strange footsteps caused Tiangu's heart to faintly tremble. His breathing immediately became much more rapid. This is the power of laws. You're also a saint. However, your aura is much weaker than a saint, but you have the aura of Saint Rune laws on your body. You're actually an invincible emperor, Lord. Tiangu forcefully calmed his rapid heartbeat. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the approaching figure. He could not help but cry out in surprise. When the figure completely walked out of the corridor, Tiangu finally saw the true appearance of the tall figure. The person was about 24 or 25 years old. He had a head of thick green hair and a pair of bright eyes that emitted a frightening indifference. However, this person's appearance was extremely ordinary, but his body possessed a special aura. Even if he stood in a crowd, he would not be ignored by others. Instead, he would stand out like a crane in a flock of chickens. This aura was very unique. The person did not say much. He merely nodded at the Blue Dragon Hall Master on the throne. Then his indifferent gaze fell on Tiangu. The Hall Master hopes that I can wake you up. As he spoke, he suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground. Immediately, the sound of the stomp was like a dragon's roar that filled the sky. A terrifying sound wave turned into a huge dragon that shot towards Tianzhong. Swoosh! The moment the dragon-shaped sound wave surged over, the person also moved. He took one step at a time, quickly closing in on Tiangu. Every step he took was able to emit a clear dragon roar. Tiangu's expression changed slightly. Black chi surged out from his body, turning into a large black blade that was dozens of feet long. Tiangu held the large black blade in his hand. With a sharp cry, he swung the blade. Boom! When the large black blade slashed on the dragon-shaped sound wave, Tiangu was stunned to discover that the dragon-shaped sound wave was transparent. It passed through his blade and poured into his ears. Ugh! The terrifying sound wave continued to stir in his ears, causing him to involuntarily spit out a mouthful of blood. Blood flowed out from his ears as he retreated a few steps. Dragon Centipede! The moment Tiangu retreated, the young man had already rushed in front of him. His right palm gently swatted out, emitting a strange frequency. Subsequently, thousands of dragon roars sounded from his palm. In a whirlpool shape, it heavily smashed into Tiangu's chest. Boom! Tiangu groaned and flew backwards, landing heavily at the edge of the hall. The aura on his body rapidly withered, becoming extremely weak. Cough, cough, cough. Wait, I'll cooperate with you. Just as Tiangu was barely able to stand up, the young man took another step forward. The entire hall was filled with deafening dragon roars. Tiangu's expression changed drastically as he hurriedly begged for mercy. His injuries were too severe. Not only had he gone through the burial array, but he had also been crushed by the war god portrait. He only had a sliver of consciousness left. So how could he be a match for the young man who had comprehended the Saint Rune law? The young man did not stop. He was acting under the orders of the Blue Dragon Hall Master, so he naturally would not stop because of Tiangu's words. The young man once again closed in on Tiangu. He lifted his right leg and swept it out. The whistling wind turned into a huge dragon and kicked at Tiangu's face. Qing Longzi, that's enough. When the young man's right leg was several inches away from Tiangu's face, the hall master's voice rang out. The young man's right leg immediately stopped, and he very naturally placed his right foot down as he slowly took a few steps back. Tiangu stared at the young man in front of him in fear. He asked, "What Saint Rune law have you comprehended? Why does every step contain the sound of a dragon's roar?" The law of dragon's roar is accompanied by a powerful dragon's roar in my attacks. It has the amplification effect of sound waves, and it can also use the sound waves to disrupt my opponent's mind and hearing, the young man said without batting an eyelid. The law of dragon's roar. Looks like it's an extraordinary power of law, Tiangu said in surprise. There were many types of Saint Rune laws. There were ordinary laws, and naturally there were special laws. The law of dragon's roar that the young man had comprehended was a special power of law. Generally speaking, it was much more difficult to comprehend a special power of law than an ordinary power of law. The young man's talent was clearly extremely powerful and terrifying to be able to comprehend the special law of dragon's roar. Chapter 1308. Bottom of the Nine Peaks. Tiangu's face froze a little when he heard that. His expression turned a little ugly as he coldly snorted. I can cooperate with your dragon wasteland, but you must do your best to help me recover. Of course, if another heavenly saint-level expert can appear in our dragon wasteland, we will be able to suppress the other 8 great netherworld factions. Our dragon wasteland will naturally cooperate with you. However, for the sake of restraining both of us, and not breaking the contract, we still need to sign a contract. The hall master smiled faintly. With a flick of his finger, he took out an ancient scroll. There were many symbols floating on the surface of the scroll. He opened the scroll and slid his finger across his thumb. A drop of blood appeared on his thumb, and he pressed his thumb into the scroll. After doing all that, he tossed the scroll to Tiangu and said indifferently, "This is a contract scroll. With this layer of protection, there will be no mistakes in our cooperation." Tiangu narrowed his eyes. However, when he saw the chilliness in the hall master's eyes, he knew that the latter had no other choice. Hence, he followed suit and dripped his blood onto the scroll, after which he tossed it to the hall master. Haha, I hope that our cooperation will go smoothly. In the future, you will be the 10th Azure Dragon envoy of the Blue Dragon Hall. Do not reveal your identity as Tiangu so easily. The hall master laughed out loud. He was quite satisfied with Tiangu's actions. Alright, since the contract has been signed, I will take my leave first. Also, send someone to arrange a place for me to stay. At the same time, I need flesh and blood energy to recover. Tiangu said with an evil smile. The hall master smiled faintly. I naturally know that. I will order someone to arrange a place for you to stay. As for your recovery, I have my own plans. Don't worry. Since that is the case, that would be for the best. Tiangu nodded. Soon after, he ignored the hall master and left the hall. Watching the figure gradually disappear into the distance, the originally silent Qing Longzi suddenly said in a deep voice, Hall master, this Tiangu is not easy to control. Cooperating with it is no different from asking a tiger for its skin. The hall master shook his head. You don't know much about Tiangu. This thing is extremely terrifying. Even if it is only a clone, it is difficult for us to control it. If you plan to control this Tiangu, I'm afraid that you will be disappointed in the end. All we need to do is cooperate with it. Within the divine nether realm, Moyan and Bai Yen led Zhuowen's group into the inner courtyard. What a huge mountain! When everyone arrived at the foot of the mountain in the inner courtyard, only then did they discover how enormous the mountain peak that stood in the endless mountain range was. They stood at the foot of the mountain and raised their heads to look at the mountain peak, but they actually discovered that they were completely unable to see the end of the mountain peak. The 9 mountain peaks were arranged in a ring shape, and each mountain peak was separated by a distance of 1,000 miles. Above the mountain peaks, there was a white mist lingering around. Zhuowen and the others were even able to see that there were numerous figures moving about on the mountain paths at the waist of every mountain. They were probably the inner court disciples that were moving about on the mountain paths. At the center of the 9 mountain peaks was an enormous circular empty space that spanned thousands of miles. There were countless buildings on the empty space. There were unique pavilions, elegant tiled houses, quiet bamboo buildings, simple wooden houses and various other buildings scattered across the empty space in a picturesque manner. That is, Buddhist Zhuowen pointed at the buildings on the empty space in the middle of the 9 mountain peaks, and asked in a somewhat astonished manner. That is the heart of the 9 mountain peaks. It is the gathering place of the official disciples and nominal disciples of the inner courtyard. Moyan and Bai Yen explained. Zhuowen, there are not only nominal disciples and official disciples in the inner courtyard. Above these 2 types of disciples, there are also core disciples and direct disciples. Only core disciples and direct disciples can enter the 9 mountain peaks. The position of direct disciples is much higher than the core disciples. They can receive personal guidance from the peak master of each mountain peak. Of course, their strength and talent are naturally 1 in a million. Moyan Wuxiang, who was standing beside Zhuowen, suddenly opened his mouth to explain. After all, she was the granddaughter of Moyan and Baiyan. Although she had never entered the inner courtyard before, Moyan and Baiyan had told her about the matters of the inner courtyard. Therefore, she knew more about the inner courtyard than a layman like Zhuowen. Oh, there are actually core disciples and direct disciples above the official disciples? Zhuowen frowned slightly. He was rather astonished. Soon after, he asked, "Then how do I advance to become a core disciple?" If you want to advance to become a core disciple, you naturally have to choose from among the official disciples. Only when your talent and strength are recognized can you become a core disciple and enter the corresponding mountain peak. Moyan and Baiyan smiled and explained, "Zhuowen, although you have already been accepted as a nominal disciple by the Sky Capital Peak, this nominal disciple does not have a fixed mountain peak. Only after you become a core disciple will you have the right to choose the corresponding mountain peak to cultivate. The 9 mountain peaks each have their own characteristics. Although the Sky Capital Peak is the strongest among the 9 mountain peaks, it is not necessarily the most suitable. When you enter the inner courtyard, you can learn more about the 9 mountain peaks and choose the most suitable mountain peak for you to cultivate." Moyan and Baiyan naturally knew how strong Zhuowen was. With Zhuowen's strength, it was inevitable for him to become a core disciple. They even believed that Zhuowen could be promoted to a direct disciple in a short period of time. After all, at Zhuowen's age and cultivation, it was rare for him to possess a strength comparable to a 7th-level emperor. Even in the inner courtyard, it was rare. "Dean, aren't you going to see the old man of the Sky Capital Peak? Although we are not core disciples, we should be qualified to enter the Sky Capital Peak with you, right?" Zhuowen looked at Moyan and Baiyan and said somewhat excitedly. Looking at Zhuowen's appearance, how could Moyan and Baiyan not know what this brat was thinking? He probably wanted to see Mu Qinxue as soon as possible. Moyan and Baiyan smiled and said, "I will naturally bring you to the Sky Capital Peak. However, I can only bring 2 people. If there are too many people, it will be inconvenient." Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. His gaze fell on the people behind him and said, "Dean, can they also join the inner courtyard and become nominal disciples? With my recommendation, it will naturally not be difficult to become a nominal disciple of the inner courtyard. Moreover, many of your friends are Emperor Realm cultivators. Even if they become official disciples, the inner courtyard will be very welcoming. However, are your friends willing to join the inner courtyard?" As Moyan and Baiyan spoke, their gazes fell on Lu Hantian, Lord of Taiyamo, Lve Tao, Luo Xing and Qing Lian. These 5 people came with Zhuowen. Although Zhuowen planned to join the inner courtyard, these 5 people's thoughts might not necessarily be the same as Zhuowen's. Big brother Hantian, Taiyamo, brother Lv, Luo Xing and Qing Lian, do you all plan to join the inner courtyard? Zhuowen asked the 5 people. Lu Hantian shook his head and smiled. "Zhuowen, the inner courtyard is not suitable for me. After all, I like to be free and unfettered. You can join the inner courtyard first. I plan to walk around the Divine Spectre realm. Who knows, I might have a fortuitous encounter. Haha." On the other hand, Lve Tao, Qing Lian and Luo Xing looked at each other and stood beside Lu Hantian. Lve Tao said, "Zhuowen, I plan to cultivate with uncle." As for Qing Lian and Luo Xing, they stared at Zhuowen with complicated eyes. They naturally knew that Zhuowen had come to the Divine Spectre realm's inner courtyard with great difficulty, mainly for one person. Moreover, it was a woman. This woman's name was Mu Qinxue. They did not want to disturb Zhuowen and Mu Qinxue, so they planned to take the initiative to avoid that scene. They also chose not to join the inner courtyard. Grand Demon Lord shook his head. The inner court wasn't suitable for a demonic cultivator like him, so he naturally couldn't join the inner court. That would only delay his progress. Since that's the case, I won't force you. I hope that big brother Hantian, and you can take a good look around the Divine Spectre realm. When the time comes, You can come to the inner courtyard to visit me often. Although he was slightly disappointed by Lu Hantian and the others' tactful rejection, Zhuowen naturally would not force them. Everyone had their own choices. Definitely. Zhuowen, we do not plan to join the inner courtyard, so we naturally cannot stay here for long. We will leave first, and when the time comes, if you need us for anything, just use the communication jade symbol paper to contact us, and we will naturally come to meet you. Lu Hantian looked deeply at Zhuowen, took a few steps forward, and heavily patted Zhuowen's shoulder with both hands, and said in a deep voice, "Definitely." Zhuowen also replied cautiously. After Lve Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian bid farewell to Zhuowen, the four of them directly left the inner courtyard. As for the lord of the inner courtyard, he did not leave. He came to Zhuowen's side and said in a low voice, "Master, in the 9 Netherworld realm, the most suitable place for devil cultivators is the desolate Nether realm. This old servant will wait for you to resolve this matter. And then I plan to go to the desolate Nether realm with your devil Dao clone to cultivate." Zhuowen nodded. When he first entered the 9 Netherworld realm, he had already discussed the matter of going to the desolate Nether realm with the lord of the inner courtyard. However, Zhuowen planned to first come to the inner courtyard to deal with the cold poison in Mu Qinshua's body, and then let the devil Dao clone leave. After all, the devil Dao clone was the strongest clone besides the main body. It was many times stronger than the Buddha Dao clone, so bringing it along with him would naturally be an additional layer of protection. Wu Shang, Qing Yin, and Zhuowen are already nominal disciples. You can enter the bottom of the 9 peaks and choose a residence. As for Jianan, Gatha, and Imo Lingtian, you 3 haven't registered your identities yet. Follow me to the bottom of the 9 peaks to register first. Moyen Baiyan waved his sleeve and led Zhuowen and the others to the bottom of the 9 peaks. The bottom of the 9 peaks was indeed very large. Zhuowen estimated that the open space should be more than half the size of Excellent Spirit Island. The entrance of Moyen Baiyan and the others naturally attracted the attention of many people in the open space. However, when they felt the aura of the intermediate emperor realm from Moyen Wushang, many people showed fear and respect in their eyes. Chapter 1309. One is not enough. Moyen Baiyan arrived in front of the round tower and gently knocked on the edge of the window. This immediately woke up the dozing lady. The lady was looking at Moyen Baiyan in front of her with some uncertainty. She seemed to have recognized the latter and asked in a surprised manner, "Elder Moyen, why have you come to the inner academy?" "Zhang Shui, I have come to bring some people to register. The little fellows behind me are this year's elite disciples of the outer academy." Moyen Baiyan paused in a timely manner when he spoke until this point. Zhang Shui also reacted. Her eyes landed on the few people behind Moyen Baiyan and asked in a surprised manner, "Elder Moyen, the quality of your outer academy's disciples this time around is quite good. There are actually 4D stage experts." Zhang Shui's pretty eyes took another look at Zhuowen, Qing Yin, Moyen Wushang and Gatha as she spoke. She nodded with some satisfaction. Immediately, her eyes landed on Jianan and Imo Lingtian. She said, "The auras of these 2 little fellows are surging. They are about to break through to the emperor stage. Your outer academy is really filled with talents this time around." Moyen Baiyan's eyes narrowed when he heard Zhang Shui's praise. He revealed a pleased smile. He was after all the headmaster of the outer academy. He would naturally feel proud if an outer academy disciple was praised by someone from the inner academy. However, I have heard that Elder Saixia of the Sky Capital Peak went to your outer academy to select a disciple in name only. Why did he not return with you?" Zhang Shui suddenly asked. Moyen Baiyan's expression was a little dull. He said in a deep voice, "This time around, I have come because of this matter. I have nothing to say about Elder Saixia's matter. This involves some important matters." Zhang Shui also became solemn when she saw Moyen Baiyan being so cautious. She nodded and said, "In that case, I shall not ask any further. I will help you arrange these 6 little fellows." As she spoke, Zhang Shui's jade-like hand rummaged around and took out 6 jade tokens. She said, "Among these 6 jade tokens, 4 of them are official disciple identity tokens, while the other 2 are honorary disciple identity tokens. Zhang Shui handed the 6 jade plates to Zhuowen, and the other 5 behind Moyan Baiyan after she spoke. Thank you very much, Moyan Baiyan said with a smile. Zhang Shui waved her hand. Her beautiful eyes stared at the 6 people behind Mo Yen and Bai Yen. She said, in the inner academy, being a nominal disciple and an official disciple is nothing. If you have the strength and talent, becoming a core disciple is your true ability. Moyan and Bai Yen nodded. What Zhang Shui said was true. In the inner courtyard, only the core disciples and the personal disciples were valued. Only these 2 kinds of disciples had a transcendent status in the inner courtyard. Not only could they get a lot of cultivation resources, but they could also get pointers from the seniors of their respective peaks. As for personal disciples, they were even more amazing. They were the personal disciples of the 9 peak masters, and would receive personal guidance from the 9 peak masters. The treatment was extremely good. As for the official disciples and nominal disciples, they were left at the bottom of the 9 peaks, allowing them to compete and cultivate. Every year, the 9 peaks would hold a selection to select the most talented and powerful individual disciples to become core disciples. Zhang Shui was the administrator of the bottom of the 9 peaks. As long as the warriors who applied to join had their talent and strength recognized by her, most of them would be able to successfully join the bottom of the 9 peaks. However, if they wanted to enter the top of the 9 peaks, it was not under her control, nor was she able to control them. The yuan-qi distribution at the bottom of the 9 peaks is not uniform. The closer you are to the center, the richer the yuan-qi is. Therefore, if you want a better place to cultivate, you can only rely on yourself to fight for it. After taking out the jade plates, Zhang Shui instructed. After all, these 6 little fellows were brought by Moyan Baiyan. Naturally, she would give them preferential treatment. I know. When the time comes, I will tell these little fellows. Moyan Baiyan nodded. After exchanging greetings for a while, Moyan Baiyan led Zhuowen and the other 5 to the bottom of the 9 peaks. The bottom of the 9 peaks was really large. From the edge to the core, there were many buildings. Although there were many buildings, the number of warriors at the bottom of the 9 peaks was even greater. Therefore, Zhuowen also saw many warriors who did not have a place to stay. They directly sat cross-legged at the edge of the open space, cultivating and meditating. These warriors who did not have a place to stay were basically nominal disciples with mediocre strength. In this area, nominal disciples were considered the lowest existence. Naturally, they could not compete with the official disciples. And those who were able to cultivate at the bottom of the 9 peaks were basically the strongest among the official disciples. Zhuowen looked into the distance. He could see that in the center of the 9 peaks, there was a white platform that was dozens of feet wide. On that platform, there were 5 figures silently sitting cross-legged. The auras of these 5 figures were very powerful. They were much more powerful than the surrounding warriors. The surrounding warriors also revealed a look of awe when they looked at the platform. These 5 people were the strongest among the official disciples. They had experienced countless battles at the bottom of the 9 peaks, and were recognized as experts by everyone. Although many people yearned for the platform in the center, no one dared to provoke the 5 people on the platform, because they knew that they would only be humiliating themselves if they went up. The auras of these 5 people are very strong. They are much stronger than ordinary Emperor Realm warriors. Moyan Wuxiang's beautiful eyes stared at the 5 people on the platform. Her eyes revealed a tinge of fear, because she could not see through these 5 people at all. These 5 people are recognized as the strongest among the official disciples. Their strength is around the 3rd level Emperor Realm. However, their battle strength is probably much higher than their cultivation. You need to find a place to stay at the bottom of the 9 peaks. After you find it, I will bring Zhuowen to Sky Capital Peak to find your little lover. Moyan Baiyan teased as he glanced at Zhuowen with a smile. The latter shrugged his shoulders and revealed a bitter smile. I know what you mean. Finding a place to stay means robbing. I understand. Anyway, brother Zhuowen is so strong. We can just pick a place here. Hehe. As soon as Moyan Baiyan's voice faded, Jianan impatiently rushed to the bottom of the 9 peaks. He had blind confidence in Zhuowen. If he got into trouble, Zhuowen would take care of it. Jianan's voice was not soft. Naturally, it attracted the attention of many warriors at the bottom of the 9 peaks. Although they were extremely unhappy with Jianan's words, they did not say anything when they saw that there were 4 Emperor Realm warriors behind him. The group followed Jianan and arrived at about 2/3 of the area at the bottom of the 9 peaks. The buildings here were even more densely packed, and the pavilions were even more neatly arranged. These pavilions were all made of white jade and looked rather dry and clean. Moreover, just as Zhang Shui had said, the yuan energy density here was much denser than the edge. Zhuowen even discovered that although the yuan energy density here was not as high as the Azure Dragon Hall, the difference was not too great. It seemed that the inner academy was indeed extraordinary. The bottom of the 9 peaks must have been set up by some powerful arcana master to gather yuan energy. Otherwise, the yuan energy here would not be so dense. Jianan quickly fixed his eyes on a rather large white jade pavilion and hurriedly rushed in. However, not long after, he was thrown out while grimacing in pain. Boom! Jianan fell to the ground and grimaced in pain. However, his skin was rough, and he only snorted a few times before he stood up as if nothing had happened. Thud thud thud. Not long after Jianan was thrown out, 4 strong figures walked out from the white jade pavilion. The 4 of them were around 10 feet tall, and the muscles on their bodies were bulging. They were bronze-colored and looked like weathered rocks. They looked extremely hard. In particular, the auras of the 4 of them were actually filled with a terrifying emperor pressure. The 4 of them were all emperor stage practitioners. Brat, a mere nominal disciple dares to barge into our pavilion. Are you courting death? The leader of the 4 was a man whose face was filled with scars. His exposed skin was covered with scars. At first glance, he looked extremely ferocious. If one were to bump into this person in the dark, it was likely that some timid people would be greatly frightened. Jianan was completely unafraid. His right hand pointed at the scarred man and snorted. I think that you should hurry up and move out of this white jade pavilion. Otherwise, it would not look good if you were to be kicked out later. Oh, Jianan's arrogant words immediately caused the scarred man and the other 3 to be stunned. Soon after, they burst into laughter. Even some of the surrounding practitioners, who were watching the show, started to jeer. Where did this stinking brat come from? He actually dares to point at us and tell us to move out of our territory. This is really too funny. The 4 brawny men laughed out loud as if they had heard an unbelievable joke. Thud thud thud. A clear sound of footsteps rang out. Soon after, a slightly thin but extremely tall figure slowly arrived in front of Jianan. A pair of indifferent voices muttered from his mouth, "He's right. You can move out of the pavilion." After he finished speaking, a wave of emperor pressure surged out from Zhuowen's body. It grew stronger and stronger. An extremely violent hurricane swept out around him. Moreover, the surface of his body was suffused with a blazing golden light. Feeling this terrifying emperor pressure, the scarred man and the other 3's faces froze. Soon after, the scarred man's face became slightly gloomy as he said, "Are you new? I've never seen you before. Although you're also at the Emperor Realm, you're also at the first-level Emperor Realm like us. How dare you speak such arrogant words?" Zhuowen was a Buddhist clone, so his cultivation was only at the first-level Emperor Realm. However, his battle strength was much stronger than a first-level Emperor Realm cultivator. Naturally, he did not take the 4 people in front of him seriously. "If you don't move, then let's fight." Zhuowen did not want to waste time talking nonsense. He took a step forward. The golden light on the surface of his body burned brighter and brighter. His aura also became more and more terrifying, causing the scarred man and the other 3's faces to become extremely ugly. "You'll regret it." The scarred man snorted coldly. A similarly terrifying emperor pressure surged out. He took a step forward and was prepared to teach Zhuowen a lesson. "Wait!" Zhuowen suddenly spat out these words, causing the scarred man to stop. Soon after, he said coldly, "Regret it? If you do, I can overlook your rude behavior just now." Although the scarred man was extremely displeased by Zhuowen's disregard, The aura on Zhuowen's body was too powerful and terrifying. He did not dare to underestimate it. If Zhuowen was willing to retreat, he naturally did not want to cause any more trouble. One of you is not enough. 4 of you can come at me together. Chapter 13:10. LVE. Not only were the surrounding cultivators stunned, but the other 4 people, including the scarred man, were also stunned. The young man in front of them was only at the first level of the martial emperor realm. His cultivation was the same as the 4 of them, yet he dared to say that he would fight against 4 of them alone. Wasn't that a little too arrogant? Are you joking? The scarred man's eyes were gloomy as he said coldly. Zhuowen shook his head and said seriously, I'm not joking. I'm serious. Boom. The scarred man stomped his foot on the ground. Countless energy waves rose, and the ground cracked. His voice became extremely cold as he said, Are you messing with me? The young man in front of him was clearly at the first level of the martial emperor realm like him. However, he was now asking him to fight against 4 of them. His attitude completely infuriated the scarred man. Boss, kill him. He's too arrogant. He's just a newbie. How dare he be so arrogant? He's courting death. That's right. He's only at the first level of the martial emperor realm. How dare he ask the 4 of us to team up against him? Who does he think he is? The other 3 companions behind the scarred man shouted. Their words showed that they did not put Zhuowen in their eyes. I'm not messing with you. I'm serious. Zhuowen said seriously. Bastard, you've completely angered me. The scarred man's lips twitched. In his eyes, Zhuowen's serious expression was really asking for a beating. Hence, he immediately charged towards Zhuowen. With a strong gust of wind, he appeared in front of Zhuowen and threw a punch at him. Seeing this scene, the surrounding cultivators sneered. The 3 companions of the scarred man also looked at him mockingly. However, their expressions did not last for long. Boom! Zhuowen took a step forward and also sent forth a punch. His punch contained a blazing golden light, and an enormous ancient Buddha's image appeared behind him. That ancient Buddha's image also sent forth a punch. The mountain-like fist was accompanied by a sharp sound of air being torn apart. It was like an explosion that resounded in everyone's ears. The 2 fists suddenly smashed together. Immediately, an endless amount of astral wind swept out between the 2. This astral wind began to spread, from 10 feet to 100 feet. The ground cracked apart, collapsing into a circular pit, as a loud muffled thunder-like sound rang out. Crack! After the thunder-like sound rang out, the ear-piercing sound of bones cracking rang out. The sound of bones cracking became more and more frequent. It was as if a bone was being crushed into powder in an instant. Soon after, everyone was stunned to discover that a figure flew backwards in an extremely miserable manner and heavily smashed onto the ground. Before everyone could react, the figure that landed on the ground held his right arm and began to let out a heart-wrenching and lung-splitting miserable shriek. His voice was like a midnight snack, extremely ferocious and miserable. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Numerous gazes were attracted by the miserable cry. Soon after, they were stunned to find that the person who was holding his right hand and screaming on the ground was none other than the burly man with the scar on his face. Dao Hin was defeated just like that. Many people muttered softly. Dao Hin was quite famous in the bottom of the 9 peaks. He could be considered a tyrant in a small area. At this moment, his right hand was crippled in front of a practitioner of the same level as him. When the martial emperor realm experts' gazes landed on the young man again, the surprise in their eyes became even more intense. This was because the young man was quietly standing in the same spot. His entire body was bathed in golden light. Behind him, a huge ancient Buddha sat in the void with narrowed eyes. It looked as if it had existed since ancient times. Boss! Dao Hin's 3 companions came to his side and helped him up. At the same time, one of them used Yuan power to enter Dao Hin's right arm in an attempt to heal the injury on his arm. You are so ruthless. You actually shattered the bones in my boss's hand? Dao Hin's companion, who had originally wanted to heal Dao Hin, froze when he touched Dao Hin's right arm. He immediately glared at Zhuowen. although a warrior's recovery ability was much stronger than an ordinary warrior's after his cultivation reached the Emperor realm. This time, all the bones in his right arm had turned to dust. Although he could recover with his own strength, it would take a lot of time. I don't have time to argue with you. Give up your territory. Otherwise, you will end up like your boss. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He only wanted to go to Sky Capital Peak to find Mu Qinxue. Naturally, he did not want to waste too much time on these people. Therefore, he used a thunderous method right from the start. Bastard! Dao Hen's face turned pale. He stood up immediately, but his right arm hung limply. He glared at Zhuowen and said, I will definitely kill you. Brothers, release your armor souls. Let's attack together. As he spoke, Dao Hen roared angrily. Energy surged out of his body. A huge saber shadow swept out from between his eyebrows. The saber shadow was extremely black, like a black moon hanging in the sky. It looked extremely sharp and terrifying. Let's attack together. After Dao Hen released his armor soul, the three people behind him also released their armor souls. These three people's armor souls were the same as Dao Hen's. They were a sword, a halberd, and a spear respectively. As soon as the four weapons were released, they turned into four streams of light and rushed toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen opened and closed his eyes. Boundless Buddhist light burst from his eyes. Then, his body grew taller and taller, turning into a towering Buddha. Every time he moved, there was a terrifying power that could shake the heavens and earth. Boom! The Buddha's right hand suddenly blasted out. The palm was 1,000 feet long, like a towering mountain. It gave people the feeling that it was extremely high. Break! Zhuowen's indifferent voice rang out, as the Buddha's palm smashed onto the four weapons. Instantly, the four armor souls emitted a humming sound before they actually shattered. As for Dao Hen and the other three, they spat out a mouthful of blood from the impact of the gigantic Buddha's palm, and were heavily smashed dozens of meters away. How terrifying! The towering Buddha's body was so majestic that all the martial artists at the bottom of the 9 peaks were attracted by the battle. When their eyes fell on Zhuowen's towering Buddha body, they were all surprised. Even the 5 figures on the central stone platform slowly opened their eyes because of the huge commotion. However, they only took a glance at the Buddha's body and did not pay much attention to it. Although Zhuowen's combat strength had surpassed that of a First Heaven Emperor realm warrior, there was still a gap between him and the 5 of them. The 5 of them only took a glance at him before they closed their eyes again and continued to cultivate. The core disciple selection was about to begin. The 5 of them naturally did not dare to slack off. They were looking forward to successfully becoming a core disciple. The 100,000 feet tall Buddha body only lasted for a while before Zhuo, when regained his original appearance. His gaze landed on Dao Hen's group of 4, whose auras were dispirited, as he spoke in an indifferent voice. Can you give up your territory now? Dao Hen's eyes flickered. He snorted coldly and left with his 3 companions. Zhuowen was too powerful. They could only admit defeat this time. After Dao Hen left, Zhuowen and his group directly entered the loft, leaving many warriors in the surroundings to discuss spiritedly. Zhuowen's group were all unfamiliar faces, so they were naturally able to guess that this group of people were probably new students that had just entered the inner court. However, these new students were truly slightly special. As soon as they entered, they directly seized a good piece of territory. Even though this had happened in the past, it was rare. The White Jade Loft was quite large. There was no problem for more than a dozen people to stay in. Therefore, Zhuowen and his group chose their own rooms and arranged everything. He planned to follow Moyan and Bai Yin to Sky Capital Peak. Grandfather, I also want to go to Sky Capital Peak with you. I haven't seen Sister Qinxue for a long time. This time, I must meet her. Moyan Wuxiang said to Moyan and Bai Yin. Moyan and Bai Yin did not refuse and said, You and Zhuowen can follow me. Although I don't know where that little girl Qinxue is at Sky Capital Peak. However, with that girl's talent, she should be at least a core disciple of Sky Capital Peak. She might even be a personal disciple. After saying that, Moyan and Bai Yin led Zhuowen and Moyan Wuxiang, who were filled with anticipation, out of the White Jade Loft. They arranged for Jianan and the others to cultivate in the loft. When they returned from Sky Capital Peak, they would naturally return here. After Moyen and Bai Yin walked out of the loft, they directly took out the sky-piercing sail. The three of them stepped onto the deck and rushed towards a mountain peak in the east. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain peak, Zhuowen, who was on the deck, could see that there was a huge mountain gate at the foot of the mountain. Behind the mountain gate, there was a misty white fog. It was impossible to see what was behind the mountain gate. Is there a restriction in the mountain gate? After walking down the deck, Zhuowen keenly discovered that there was a layer of transparent flowing light in the mountain gate. The flowing light revealed waves of mysterious energy. Needless to say, it must be some kind of extremely powerful restriction array. It's fine. I'm the dean of the Outer Academy. I have a certain authority to enter the 9 mountain peaks. After saying that, Moyen and Bai Yin took out a wooden tablet from their bosom. They formed a seal with their right hand and inserted yuan power into the wooden tablet. Immediately, a ray of light rushed out from the wooden tablet. It passed through the mountain gate and entered the misty white fog. After a while, Zhuowen saw a figure faintly appear within the white fog behind the mountain gate. The figure grew closer and closer. Finally, it appeared in front of the mountain gate. It passed through the mountain gate without any obstructions and arrived in front of Moyen and Bai Yin. It was an old man with a head full of messy hair, a fluffy beard and a face full of deep wrinkles. He was around 60 years old and was wearing a brown long robe. Although this old man appeared to be in his twilight years, his eyes were extremely sharp. Endless sharpness surged within them. The instant he saw Moyen and Bai Yin, he suddenly laughed out loud and said, "Bai Yin, it has been 50 years since we last met. This time around, you actually have the time to come to the Inner Academy. It's really rare." Chapter 13:11. Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. Of course we welcome them. Are these 2 geniuses from your outer court? LVE laughed. His gaze fell on Zhuowen and Moyen Wushang behind Moyen Bai Yin as he said with a smile, "Wushang, you should know that she's my granddaughter. This kid is called Zhuowen, a genius from my outer court. His talent is comparable to that little girl Mu Qinxue," Moyen Bai Yin said with a laugh. LVE looked at Zhuowen in surprise, but soon after, he shook his head with a smile. It was clear that he did not agree with Moyen Bai Yin's words. Mu Qinxue's talent was publicly acknowledged in the entire Sky Capital Peak. In a short period of time, she had jumped from an official disciple to the direct disciple of Old Man Tian. She could be considered an influential figure in the inner court. Zhuowen was young, and his cultivation had reached the emperor realm. His talent was not bad, but compared to Mu Qinxue, there was still a large gap. Of course, he naturally could not say this out loud. He only smiled and said, "These 2 little fellows are good seedlings. If they work hard, it won't be difficult for them to become core disciples of the 9 peaks." LVE's perfunctory attitude was naturally seen by Moyen Bai Yin, but he was not angry. He was very clear on how terrifying Mu Qinxue's talent was. Even in the 9 Nether realm, she was a dazzling genius. It was already amazing for one of them to appear in their outer court, but if there was a second one, it would be unreal. It was no wonder that LVE did not care about Moyen Bai Yin's words. Moyen Bai Yin looked at Zhuowen and asked with a smile, "Chen Shui came from the outer court after all. I wonder how she is doing in your Sky Capital Peak?" When he mentioned Mu Qinxue, a smile appeared on LVE's face. Chen Shui's talent is very high. In less than a year after entering the inner court, she has already been accepted as a disciple by Old Man Tiandu, becoming the 4th direct disciple of the Sky Capital Peak. She has already become a direct disciple? So fast. Moyen and Bai Yin were startled. Soon after, joy appeared in their eyes. They were happy for Mu Qinxue. As for Zhuowen, he raised his head and looked at the peak of Sky Capital Peak. His heart started to beat rapidly as a trace of nervousness rose within him. He had not felt this way for a long time, but this time, he was nervous because he saw Mu Qinxue. This feeling made him a little confused and helpless. "That's right, didn't that fellow Wuxia go to your Bitter Sea's wonderful God Island? Why didn't you come back this time?" LVE suddenly asked. Moyen and Bai Yin's complexion suddenly became gloomy. They looked around and said in a low voice, Elder Huaxia has fallen. Lve was startled. His eyes slightly bulged as he stared at Bai Yan and Mo Yan. What did you say? Grey Pavilion had fallen? That fellow was at the peak of the 5th layer Great Emperor realm. Who else in the Bitter Sea can threaten Grey Pavilion? Lve did not believe it. The Bitter Sea was not the 9th Netherworld realm. Although there were many Great Emperor realm warriors, most of them were low-level Great Emperors. There were very few mid-level Great Emperors. In his impression, there was no one who could threaten Grey Pavilion. Moyan and Bai Yan sighed. They took out Grey Pavilion's identity token and said, I don't need to lie to you. This is Elder Huaxia's identity token. Lve fell silent. The identity token was the symbol of an inner courtyard elder. It could not be lost. Now that Elder Huaxia's identity token had appeared in Moyan and Bai Yan's hands, it meant that Grey Pavilion had probably met with an accident. What happened? Lve asked in a low voice. It's a long story. I need to see Old Man Tiandu. When the time comes, I will tell him everything that happened in the Bitter Sea. Moyan and Bai Yan shook their heads. Well, come with me. I will take you to see Old Man Tiandu. Lve nodded. With a wave of his sleeve, he removed the restriction on the mountain gate. The fog behind the mountain gate suddenly dissipated, revealing a white stone staircase. The staircase went up step by step, leading to the top of the mountain, as if there was no end to it. Let's go, Lve said, and led everyone up the staircase. After Zhuowen entered the mountain gate, he found that the surrounding white fog had dispersed on its own. His field of vision suddenly became much wider. It turned out that the endless white fog was the restriction outside the mountain gate. Only after entering the mountain gate could one see the true scenery of the mountain peak. Around the staircase, there were lush greenery. From the bottom to the top, there were many buildings. Around these buildings, there was a mountain road that extended to the top of the mountain. Of course, in addition to this mountain road, the staircase at the mountain gate also extended to the top of the mountain. It should be able to reach the top of the mountain. The sky capital peak was very tall. But under Lve's lead, the group only spent the time to drink a cup of tea to reach the top of the mountain. The top of the mountain was a flat platform, as if a mountain peak had been cut off. It was extremely flat and smooth, and the area was also very large. On the platform, there were many buildings. Moreover, these buildings were all ancient in style. The surrounding air was filled with a refreshing fragrance that refreshed one's heart. It was extremely refreshing to smell it. At the same time, Zhuowen also noticed that in the middle of the platform, there was a black iron pillar that was as thick as several people hugging it. At the top of the iron pillar, there was a black chain of the same thickness. This chain was fastened to the iron pillar and was extremely firm. Following the chain, Zhuowen turned his head to look at the other end of the chain. Soon after, he discovered an extremely shocking scene. The chain was extremely long, and at the other end, it was fastened to the bottom of a huge and majestic palace. Furthermore, there was more than one similar chain. There were 8 other chains, and the other 8 chains were derived from the other 8 directions, and were fastened to the bottom of the magnificent palace in the other 8 directions. 9 chains that seemed to have swept over from the void firmly fastened a huge palace. The palace was supported by these 9 chains, as it quietly floated in the middle of the 9 mountain peaks. This was a palace in the sky not only in name, but also in reality. What was even more bizarre was that the surface of this huge palace was not the usual pitch black and monotonous color. Instead, it was 2 different colors. The left side was icy blue, while the right side was fiery red. Moreover, on the left side of the icy blue color, terrifying cold qi continuously permeated. The cold qi dissipated into the surrounding air, causing the surrounding air to freeze. On the other hand, on the right side of the fiery red color, there was a frighteningly high temperature. A scorching sensation continuously spread from the air, causing crackling sounds to be emitted. The sky capital peak chain was located on the left side of the palace. Waves of icy blue cold qi permeated the air. Although he was extremely far away, Zhuowen could still feel a dense chill. This dense chill came from the bottom of his heart, and not just from the surface of his skin. This palace is the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace? Zhuowen's heart trembled as he gazed at the huge palace floating in the air. A trace of respect and an indescribable feeling rose in his heart. This was a strange feeling that would only appear in one's heart when one saw a majestic and spectacular sight. Yes, that's the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace. The 9 mountain peaks of the Inner Academy all possess a mysterious iron chain from outer space. It is derived from the 9 directions of the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace. And with this as a support point, it is lifted into the air. This building is the most famous and mysterious building in the entire Inner Academy, and even the Divine Spectre realm. LVE's gaze also fell on the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall in the sky as he muttered in admiration. The Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall could be said to be the core building of the entire inner court. This building had long since nurtured countless geniuses of the inner court. This was because the core of the entire Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace was operated by the legendary Ice and Fire Holy Talisman. This Ice and Fire Holy Talisman was not incomplete, but complete, and possessed all the power that belonged to the Holy Talisman. The moment he stared at the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace, Zhuowen discovered that the 2 hidden imprints on the back of his hands began to react. His left hand turned blue, while his right hand turned red. Zhuowen immediately woke up and forcibly suppressed the abnormality on the back of his hands, afraid that LVE and the others would notice. Fortunately, LVE Moyan, Bai Yan and Moyan Wuxiang's attention were all on the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace, so the 3 of them did not notice the abnormality on Zhuowen's hands. This made Zhuowen let out a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he was extremely excited. He could feel that there was something in the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace that was calling out to him. He knew that the calling was from the Ice and Fire Holy Talisman's spirit. The promise of 10 years was about to be fulfilled. How can I enter the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace? Zhuowen suddenly asked curiously. LVE took a deep look at Zhuowen and said indifferently, "Core disciples and above have the qualifications to enter the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace. But even for core disciples, it's not that easy to enter the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace, because the ice and fire energy around the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace is very violent. Even high-level martial emperors may die if they are not careful." Die. Zhuowen's pupils shrank, and he sucked in a breath of cold air and muttered to himself. Wasn't the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace an object of the inner courtyard? How could the energy be so violent that even high-level martial emperors could not approach it? Perhaps sensing the doubt in Zhuowen's eyes, LVE did not say anything. Instead, he looked at Moyan and Bai Yan and said, "Bai Yan, it seems that you really didn't tell this little guy anything." Moyan and Bai Yan shrugged and said, "It's useless to tell him. It's better to wait for him to come to the inner courtyard first and experience the terror of the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace. This kind of personal experience is much better than telling him verbally." Then, Moyan and Bai Yan suddenly said seriously, "Zhuowen, although the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace was built by the seniors of the inner courtyard, the core of the Ice and Fire Twin Extremes Palace is the Ice and Fire Holy Talisman. This thing is a terrifying object born from heaven and earth, and is also an extremely rare treasure. This thing is extremely uncontrollable." Chapter 13:12. News from Mu Chenxue. The Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is a saint weapon? Zhuowen was somewhat astonished. Back then, when he had heard about the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall, he did not associate this building with a saint artifact. However, after hearing Mo Yan and Bai Yan's words, he became much more enlightened. How could a building that could carry a supreme treasure, like the Ice and Fire Sacred Talisman, be ordinary? It had to be at least a saint weapon. Moreover, Zhuowen could also feel that the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace wasn't just a profound saint weapon. It was very likely that its quality was above a profound saint weapon. After all, he had a profound saint weapon, the Heavenless Sword. Although the Heavenless Sword was severely damaged, the aura of a profound saint weapon left a deep impression on Zhuowen. He could feel that the aura of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace was even more terrifying than the Heavenless Sword. Obviously, The quality of the ice and fire dual polarity palace was above a profound saint weapon. The inner yard is really not simple. They were actually able to build such a powerful saint weapon, like the ice and fire dual polarity palace, Zhuowen secretly muttered. However, that senior expert of the inner yard never expected that after the ice and fire sacred talisman entered the ice and fire dual polarity palace, its power would become stronger and stronger after many years of nurturing. In the end, it became violent and uncontrollable. Moyen and Bai Yin pointed to the 9 chains in the void and continued. These 9 chains not only have the effect of supporting the ice and fire dual polarity palace, but the black pillars at the end of the chains go straight to the bottom of the mountain. There is a huge yuan vein there. It is precisely by relying on the power of the underground yuan vein that the 9 chains can firmly suppress the ice and fire dual polarity palace. Although the 9 chains are suppressing the ice and fire dual polarity palace, the ice and fire energy on the surface of the palace is uncontrollable. If one's strength is insufficient and approaches the ice and fire dual polarity palace without permission, they will inevitably die. LVE interjected at this moment. If the ice and fire dual polarity palace is so dangerous, wouldn't it be difficult for most disciples to enter it to cultivate? Zhuowen frowned and asked with flickering eyes. However, LVE smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about that. After a period of time, the violent energy in the ice and fire dual extreme palace will weaken a lot. At that time, the disciples of the 9 peaks will swarm in. Moreover, even though the energy of the ice and fire polarity halls is usually extremely violent, with the strength of the 9 peak masters, it is naturally quite easy for them to approach the ice and fire polarity halls. Normally, the peak masters would bring their personal disciples into the ice and fire polarity halls to cultivate." Hearing this, Zhuowen and Moyen Wuxiang looked at each other and nodded. After explaining a little about the ice and fire dual extreme palace, LVE continued to lead Zhuowen and Bai Yin deeper into the platform. This platform was originally very large. Along the way, Zhuowen looked around and saw many pavilions. Along the way, Zhuowen naturally encountered many martial artists, wearing the uniform of the inner court. However, these martial artists were dressed differently from the official disciples and registered disciples of the 9 peaks. Zhuowen guessed that these were the core disciples of the Sky Capital Peak. What surprised Zhuowen was that these core disciples of the Sky Capital Peak were basically above the Middle Emperor realm. Although there were also Low Emperor realm warriors, they were extremely few. Moreover, they were the kind of guys with extremely powerful auras. Obviously, even if they were Low Emperor realm warriors, they probably had the battle strength of a Middle Emperor realm warrior. The arrival of LVE and the others naturally attracted the attention of these core disciples. At the same time, many of them greeted LVE. Of course, there were also some core disciples who noticed Zhuowen and Moyen Wuxiang behind LVE. Their eyes were filled with doubt. This was because the auras of Zhuowen and Moyen Wuxiang were extremely weak. They were probably only first-level Emperor realm warriors. How could such cultivation enter the Sky Capital Peak? Of course, since it was LVE who led them in, although these core disciples were puzzled, they would not ask too much. Soon, LVE led the group to the front of a pagoda-shaped pavilion in the middle of the platform. In front of the pavilion hung a plaque with the words, Zhaixing Pavilion written on it. It was written in bold and powerful strokes. This Zhaixing Pavilion is where our peak master, Old Man Tiandu, lives. LVE stopped and smiled faintly. Old Man Tiandu's 4 personal disciples also live in the Zhaixing Pavilion? Zhuowen suddenly asked somewhat excitedly. LVE shook his head and said, "The 4 personal disciples naturally have their own pavilions. With the Zhaixing Pavilion as the center, there is a pagoda-shaped pavilion in each of the 4 directions. Those 4 buildings are where the 4 personal disciples live." Zhuowen turned his head and saw that there were indeed 4 pagoda-shaped pavilions in the other 4 directions. The 4 pagoda-shaped pavilions were a head taller than the other buildings on the platform. They were like cranes in a flock of chickens. "Which pavilion is Mu Qinshuan?" Zhuowen continued to ask. LVE frowned slightly and said, "Why are you looking for Mu Qinshuan?" However, Mo Yen Bai Yin laughed. Mu Qinxue, that girl, used to be a student of my outer courtyard. Zhuowen and Wuxiang were both her best friends in the past. The main reason why I came to Tian Capital Peak with me this time is to go drink with that girl and reminisce about the past. Lve nodded his head and said indifferently, if you go and find Mu Qinxue now, I'm afraid you will be disappointed, because Mu Qinxue has been sent by the Peak Master to the great desolate forest of the divine Nether Realm to carry out a killing mission. What? Mu Qinxue is not in the inner courtyard right now? Zhuowen frowned slightly and continued to ask, Senior Lve, how long will it take for Mu Qinxue to return? However, Lve shook his head and said, the great desolate forest is quite far from the inner courtyard, and it is shrouded in the power of desolation all year round. This time, the Peak Master sent Mu Qinxue to carry out a mission in order to train her. It will take at least 2 to 3 months, and at most half a year. Creak. Zhuowen clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. There were less than 3 months left before the cold poison in Mu Qinshue's body broke out. He could wait, but Mu Qinxue could not. Senior Lve, can you tell me the exact location of the great desolate forest? Zhuowen's face became gloomy as he said in a deep voice. Why are you in such a hurry to see Mu Qinxue? Lve naturally discovered that Zhuowen's expression was not right, and his voice became somewhat cold. However, Zhuowen did not pay attention to Lve, whose face had already turned gloomy, and repeated, tell me the location of the great desolate forest. I need to find Mu Qinxue. Oh, feeling Zhuowen's deep voice, Lve's eyes slowly narrowed, and a mountain-like aura swept over like an avalanche. Soon after, Lve's somewhat gloomy voice sounded. You dare to speak to me in such a manner? Zhuowen's expression did not change, as he stared at Lve, and said in a deep voice, tell me the location of the great desolate forest. Mo Yen Bai Yan's expression slightly changed, and he took a step forward, blocking in front of Zhuowen, and said with a smile, Lve, why bother with a member of the younger generation? Zhuowen and Qinshue's relationship has always been good. Maybe he's anxious to see her, so he's worried about her. Lve coldly snorted, and the aura on his body slowly converged. He said indifferently, your cultivation is only at the first layer of the Emperor realm, and you're already so arrogant. Do you think this is the outer court? I can clearly tell you that there are countless people in the inner court who are stronger than you. Don't bring your arrogance from the outer court here. It's best if you restrain yourself a little. Tell me the location of the great desolate forest. However, as soon as Lve finished speaking, Zhuowen's voice sounded again, and it was still the same sentence. This caused Lve's expression to freeze. Mo and Wuxiang quickly pulled Zhuowen and said in a low voice, Zhuowen, don't mess up. Grandfather will help you ask about the location of the great desolate forest. For now, we should just wait. Taking a deep breath, Zhuowen calmed the emotions in his chest and nodded. Sorry, I walked into a dead end just now. It's fine. You're worried about Sister Qinxue, so am I. Mo and Wuxiang smiled, but at this moment, her smile seemed a little weak, and there was a trace of sadness in her eyes. She never thought that Mu Qinshue's influence on Zhuowen would be so deep. The latter's calmness left a deep impression in Mo and Wuxiang's mind. But now, after hearing that Mu Qinxue was no longer at the Sky Capital Peak, but had gone to the great desolate forest, Zhuowen had actually lost his mind. It could be seen that Zhuowen had deep feelings for Mu Qinxue. Lve, for my sake, don't be too calculative. After all, he's just a junior. This bitter sea coral was specially brought by me. Mo Yen Bai Yan patted Lve's shoulder and took out a black coral from his spiritual ring. The surface of the coral was surrounded by black water vapor, which was the water of the bitter sea. Lve took the bitter sea coral, and his face became much better. This bitter sea coral was a very precious medicine. With this, Lve could ask the arcana masters of the inner courtyard to help him refine yuan arrays to help him cultivate. For him, it was a very precious thing. Bai Yan, you're considerate, but you better discipline your disciple. After all, this is the inner courtyard, not the outer courtyard. Lve patted the bitter sea coral and said with a gentle expression, "That's natural. Let's go in and see old man Tiandu. After all, I need to personally hand over the relics of Elder Wuxia to old man Tiandu." Moyan Baiyin said with a smile. "All right, come in with me. These two little fellows can wait outside for a while." Lve nodded, and took another look at Zhuowen, and then led Moyan Baiyin into the pavilion. At this moment, Zhuowen also calmed down. Moyan Baiyin secretly transmitted a message to him, that he would help him inquire about the specific location of the Great Desolate Forest. So Zhuowen was not too anxious. Outside the pavilion, Zhuowen and Moyan Wuxiang looked at each other without saying a word. They waited silently for about 2 hours. Finally, the tightly shut door of the pavilion slowly opened and 2 figures walked out. These 2 figures were naturally Lve and Moyan Baiyin. Lve cupped his hands towards Moyan Baiyin and said, "Baiyin, I don't need to guide the way down the mountain. I'll take my leave first." After saying that, Lve hurriedly left the place, while Moyan Baiyin quietly came to Zhuowen and Moyan Wuxiang's side. "Grandfather, have you explained the matter of Elder Wuxia?" Moyan Wuxiang suddenly asked. Chapter 13:13. Great Desolate Forest, that's good. Moyan Wuxiang nodded. She was most worried that Elder Wuxia's death would be blamed on Moyan Baiyin. Now that everything was fine, it was naturally for the best. "Dean, the location of the Great Desolate Forest?" Zhuowen stared at Moyan Baiyin and asked with anticipation. Moyan and Baiyin faintly smiled and pointed with their right hand. A mass of milky white light entered the space between Zhuowen's eyebrows. Zhuowen immediately discovered that in his sea of consciousness, information was being generated. These information gathered together and formed a map. "I've already given you the location of the Great Desolate Forest, but that place is very dangerous. It's considered an extremely dangerous place in the Divine Spectre realm. There's a creature called a Desolate Beast in there. This creature is even more terrifying than a demon emperor. Other than Desolate Beasts, most of the outlaws in the Divine Spectre realm are gathered in the Great Desolate Forest. This time, Mu Qinxue and the other inner courtyard disciples are carrying out a mission to kill the extremely famous Yiksha jellyfish, who is ranked 10th on the evil list." Moyan Baiyin's gaze became somewhat serious. Shortly after, he waved his right hand, and a picture appeared in front of him. This picture was of a middle-aged man with a face as black as charcoal, and a fiendish expression. "This Yiksha jellyfish is very powerful. It's said that it has killed 5 6th-level emperors. This person is extremely close to the 7th-level emperor realm. It's even possible that he has already broken through the 7th-level emperor realm. He's an extremely dangerous guy," Moyan Baiyin said in a low voice. Zhuowen slightly frowned and said, "Killed 5 6th-level emperors? Does Mu Qinxue have the ability to kill this Yiksha jellyfish? He actually sent her to carry out such a mission?" Moyan Baiyin said, "That girl Qinxue is very talented. She must have obtained a lot of resources in the inner courtyard. Since Elder Tiandu sent her to carry out this mission, it means that her strength is at least comparable to the Yiksha jellyfish. With the help of the other disciples, she should be able to take down the Yiksha jellyfish. But there's still a cold poison in her body, and there's less than 3 months until the cold poison erupts. So I have to hurry to the Great Desolate Forest and expel the cold poison from her body first." Zhuowen's expression was grave and stern as his deep voice slowly sounded. Moyan, Baiyin, and Moyan Wuxiang knew about the cold poison in Mu Qinshua's body. Since Zhuowen mentioned it, the two of them naturally had no objections. "I'll go with you," Moyan Wuxiang suddenly said. However, he was immediately rejected by Zhuowen. "You can't go." Since the principal said that the Great Desolate Forest is very chaotic, and is also an extremely famous dangerous place in the Divine Spectre realm, it's not appropriate for you to go. But Moyan Wuxiang still wanted to say something, but Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "Wuxiang, don't worry. I have a doppelganger. Although my Buddhist doppelganger's cultivation is only at the 1st layer Emperor realm, my devil doppelganger is at the 3rd layer Demon Emperor realm, and has the battle strength of a middle layer Emperor. As long as you're careful, you'll be fine." Zhuowen is right. "Wuxiang, you'll only be a burden to Zhuowen if you go. Now you should cultivate properly. The core disciple selection is about to begin. You should use this time to cultivate properly and strive to become a core disciple. Then you can enter the 9 peaks. That way, you'll be able to obtain the best cultivation and resources. Moyen Baiyin also advised. Seeing this, Moyen Wuxiang was silent. He only nodded and softly said to Zhuowen, "When you go to the great desolate forest, be careful. Although this is only your doppelganger, if you lose it, it will definitely cause you a certain amount of harm." "I know," Zhuowen said with a smile. "Let's go down first. As the outer courtyard dean, I can't stay here for too long. I have to return to the outer courtyard to take charge," Moyen Baiyin said with a smile. After saying that, Moyen Baiyin led the 2 of them down the stairs and walked down the sky capital peak. The thing that the 3 of them did not notice was that a figure had appeared in a window on the top floor of the Zhaixing Pavilion. Upon closer inspection, it was an old man with a long white beard. He was wearing a loose black long robe. His sharp eyes were staring at Zhuowen, who was among the Mo Yin and Baiyin trio below. A descendant of the Ryuka, with a 9th grade dragon soul. This little guy is not simple. The old man's right hand stroked his white beard as he softly muttered from the corner of his mouth. A trace of a strange expression appeared in his eyes. After walking down the sky capital peak, Zhuowen and Moyen Baiyin returned to the White Jade Pavilion where Jianan, Gatha and the rest were. After explaining the situation to everyone, Zhuowen, Moyen Baiyin and Jianan left the inner courtyard. At the entrance of the inner courtyard, Moyen Baiyin pointed at the enormous divine river in front of them and said, "Zhuowen, the great desolate forest is located in the middle and lower reaches of the divine river. It is a dark and dense forest with an extremely large area. There is no sunlight inside all year round, and it is extremely dark. Not only do you have to pay attention to the desolate beasts inside, you also have to pay attention to the martial warriors that appear inside." "Dean, I know all of this." Zhuowen nodded seriously. "And it's good that you know. Why don't I first find that girl Chen Shui with you before leaving?" Moyen Baiyin was still a little worried. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "Dean, don't worry. My main body is about to reach the divine nether realm. At that time, I will meet up with my main body and enter the great desolate forest together." "Oh, your main body is also here? That's really fast." Moyen Baiyin was startled. He nodded his head and continued, "Since your main body is here, I am redundant. You just have to pay attention to yourself." After saying that, Moyen Baiyin flew towards another direction. That was the exit of the divine nether realm. After all, he was the outer courtyard dean, and because of the heavenly insect, the auspicious god island had suffered a disastrous loss. He had to return as soon as possible to preside over it. He was very clear about how terrifying Zhuowen's main body's fighting strength was. Therefore, he did not stay behind, and only gave a few words of advice before leaving. Looking at Moyen Baiyin, who was gradually getting further away, Zhuowen became extremely calm. Soon after, his gaze fell on the front of the divine river. He took out a flying spiritual treasure from his spiritual ring and sat on it. He turned into a ray of light and disappeared from where he stood. At this moment, 2 figures appeared at the end of the bitter sea. These 2 figures were a man and a woman. The man's face was quite handsome. He wore a black robe, and his body emitted a special aura. The woman was delicate and charming. She had a curvaceous figure, and the strange thing was that she had 3 pairs of thin wings on her back. These 2 people were naturally Zhuowen and Wu Dai, who had set off from the auspicious god island. Because Zhuowen's lightning wings had mutated, their speed was much faster than ordinary flying spiritual treasures. Therefore, the 2 of them had arrived at the end of the bitter sea ahead of time. "Wu Dai, go to the demon nether realm." Zhuowen rubbed Wu Dai's head and said with a smile. Wu Dai's cheeks puffed up. Her beautiful eyes stared at Zhuowen. The rims of her eyes were actually a little red. She had a delicate and pitiful look. This look made Zhuowen feel a little embarrassed. "Master, I don't know when we will meet again after this trip to the demon god palace. Before we part, can you give me a hug?" Wu Dai whispered. Hearing this, Zhuowen touched his nose. Seeing the sadness in Wu Dai's eyes become more and more intense, Zhuowen sighed softly. He opened his arms and gently pulled her into his embrace. He said softly, "Wu Dai, cultivate well in the demon nether realm. When your master is strong, he will go to the demon nether realm to find you." Wu Dai was taken aback, but she quickly wrapped her arms around Zhuo Wen's waist and giggled. "Wu Dai will cultivate well. The demon god palace in the demon nether realm is extremely powerful. Perhaps Wu Dai will be the one protecting master in the future." "Master, I'm leaving." Wu Dai softly whispered these words in Zhuo Wen's ear. After that, Zhuo Wen felt his hands loosen. Wu Dai had unknowingly left his arms. Her pair of beautiful thin wings constantly flapped as she flew towards the demon nether realm's stone tablet. Zhuo Wen stood in the void and silently watched Wu Dai's back. When Wu Dai finally disappeared into the demon nether realm's stone tablet, he retracted his gaze and took a step forward, entering the divine nether realm. With his previous experience, Zhuo Wen didn't encounter too many obstacles when entering the divine nether realm. Furthermore, at the entrance he met Mo Yen and Bai Yen, who were preparing to leave. After exchanging some pleasantries, the two of them left the entrance. Of course, Zhuo Wen went in while Mo Yen and Bai Yen went out. The great desolate forest was located in the middle and lower reaches of the divine river. It was a triangular plain filled with sand and sand. On this plain, there were many tall, pitch-black trees. They were lush and dense, making it look rather spectacular. These black trees were called desolate trees by the divine nether realm's warriors. The reason for this name was because the desolate trees could emit a lot of black qi. This black qi was called desolate qi by many warriors. If ordinary warriors were to be contaminated by desolate qi, they would wither like trees, and their life force would gradually drain away and they would die. Of course, if one was strong enough, they would be able to withstand the desolate qi that filled the great desolate forest. Therefore, none of the warriors who could appear in the great desolate forest were mediocre. Outside the great desolate forest, there was a rather bustling small town. There were many warriors inside, and it was bustling with activity. Zhuo Wen rode on a flying soul treasure and quickly descended into the small town. When he walked down from the flying soul treasure and put it away, his footsteps stiffened slightly. Immediately, a hint of joy appeared in his eyes. He muttered in a low voice, "The original body has already entered the divine nether realm. With the original body's speed, it should only take a few days to reach the great desolate forest. I can settle down in this small town first and wait for the original body to arrive." As he spoke, Buddhist Zhuo Wen slowly walked towards the small town. Zhuo Wen's arrival didn't attract the attention of the other warriors in the small town. This was the only place where humans gathered in the great desolate forest. Although the area wasn't big, it was exceptionally bustling. Every day, there were warriors coming in and out. The aura on Zhuo Wen's body wasn't particularly strong, so it naturally wouldn't attract the attention of others. This small town isn't simple. Most of the people inside are Emperor Realm warriors. There are even quite a number of intermediate Emperor Realm warriors. Chapter 13-14. Tracking Bee. The fur of the grade 4 wild beast, purple lightning mink, is impervious to fire and water, impervious to blades and spears. If it is refined into leather armor, it can withstand the attack of a mid-level martial emperor. The horn of the grade 3 wild beast, one-horned lynx, can be refined into a long spear. Its power is comparable to an emperor weapon, indestructible. The small town was bustling with activity, and there was an endless stream of people. There were stalls on both sides of the street, and many vendors were shouting with all their might. Most of the items sold were the fur, fangs, or inner cores of desolate beasts. Although the great wild forest was full of danger, the wild beasts that lived there were treasures. Whether it was their fur or fangs, they could all be refined into extremely powerful emperor weapons. The wild beasts were also divided into grades by the Divine Spectre Realm warriors, from grade 1 to grade 10. A grade 1 wild beast was equivalent to a first heaven emperor, and a grade 10 wild beast was much stronger than a 9th heaven emperor. However, it was much weaker than a saint, and should be comparable to a half-saint warrior. As for stronger wild beasts, they had not appeared in the great wild forest yet. It was because every part of a desolate beast was a treasure that could be refined into an emperor weapon. That was why there were so many warriors in the Great Desolate Forest. Their main goal in entering the Great Desolate Forest was to hunt desolate beasts and strip them of their fur, claws, and bones. These things could be sold for a good price. Of course, the majority of those who entered the Great Desolate Forest were rogue cultivators, or those who didn't have a very strong backing. Generally, only these kinds of cultivators lacked funds and resources. After all, if a cultivator wanted to cultivate, they needed resources, and resources naturally needed to be purchased with funds. As for the disciples of the major forces, they were relatively rare in the Great Wild Forest. The resources of the major forces were extremely vast, and the warriors who lived there naturally did not have to worry about the lack of resources. Of course, it was not that the disciples of the major forces did not come to the Great Wild Forest. Generally, the main purpose of the disciples of the major forces coming to the Great Wild Forest was to train themselves. After all, on the path of martial arts, one could not just cultivate behind closed doors. If one did not know how to use one's own strength, one would be like a boorish man who only had brute strength. Other than the Great Desolate Forest, there were also other dangerous places in the Divine Spectre realm. The disciples of the major powers would basically choose these dangerous places to train, and Mu Qinshue's killing mission this time could also be considered as a form of training for Old Man Tiandu. After arriving at a small tea house, Zhuowen quietly sat in a rather secluded seat. After ordering a few dishes and tea, he poured himself a cup of tea and quietly waited for the arrival of his main body. The business of the small tea house was booming. Not long after Zhuowen sat down, quite a number of warriors bustled in. In an instant, the somewhat deserted tea house became a little livelier. The sound in the tea house also became much noisier. The discussions of the surrounding cultivators rang out continuously, causing Zhuowen to frown slightly. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. Very quickly, he noticed the 4 figures seated on the left side of the tea house. The reason why he noticed the 4 of them was because the uniforms they were wearing were the uniforms of the Inner Academy's core disciples. He had seen this uniform on Sky Capital Peak before, so he was naturally not unfamiliar with it. However, what disappointed Zhuowen was that Mu Qinshu was not among the 4 of them. The 4 of them were 3 men and 1 woman. There was a trace of worry on their faces, as if they were worried about something. That Wuxia jellyfish is truly too cunning. It actually relied on its familiarity with the Great Desolate Forest to constantly hide. Although junior sister Chen Shui is extremely powerful, it was her first time entering the Great Desolate Forest, and she was unable to catch that Wuxia jellyfish even after many days. The only woman among the 4 spoke. Her appearance was not very outstanding, but her figure was extremely hot, especially her ample bosom, which was on the verge of bursting out. Her full curves attracted the eyes of quite a few people in the tea house. Zhuowen listened with rapt attention, especially when he heard the mention of Mu Qinshu. His eyes narrowed as they exploded with an intense glow. Senior sister Guiqing is right. That Wuxia jellyfish is truly cunning and despicable. It clearly promised that if it lost a one-on-one fight, it would bind its own arms and return to the Inner Academy with us. But it actually went back on its words in the end. A tall and thin man angrily agreed. Sitting in front of the tall and thin man was a refined young man wearing a white robe. He shook his head and said, "The Wuxia jellyfish is after all a fellow ranked 10th on the sin list. Who knows how many people in the Divine Nether Realm want to catch it and obtain a large reward, but they all failed. It is because this person is full of schemes and is extremely cunning. We shouldn't have listened to this fellow's words before. It's already too late to say anything now. The Wuxia jellyfish has already escaped. Moreover, junior sister Chen Shui and the Wuxia jellyfish are too fast, so we've lost track of them. What should we do?" The girl named Guiqing had a worried look on her face. She looked at the refined young man and asked, "I say, Zhaoyu, normally your brain is the best, so why don't you think of a plan? We can't just sit here and wait." Zhaoyu was stunned. Then he said with a bitter smile, "With the Wuxia jellyfish's personality, it will definitely enter the depths of the great desolate forest. The desolate beasts there are very terrifying. So wouldn't we be seeking death if we went in? Then you mean that you don't care if junior sister Chen Shui lives or dies? Guoqing's face was filled with excitement as she spoke in a loud voice. Zhao Yu waved his hand and said, "How could we not care? However, with junior sister Chen Shui's strength, even if we can't catch the Wuxia jellyfish, nothing will happen to her. After all, she is our capital Sky Peak's fourth direct disciple, and she used the shortest amount of time to catch it, breaking capital Sky Peak's record." Guoqing curled her lips and said in a dissatisfied voice, "Then why don't you give us an idea? What use is there in saying all this? Hey, I have this little thing on me, so it shouldn't be hard to find junior sister Chen Shui." Zhao Yu revealed a mysterious smile and took out a golden ball from his sleeve. This ball was around the size of a palm, and it was releasing a golden glow, making it look very mysterious. "This is..." Guoqing and the other two men revealed looks of doubt. It was clear that they could not see what this golden ball was. "This is a tracking bee. As long as you have the scent of the person you're looking for, it will remember it. When the time comes, it will be able to follow the scent to where the owner of the scent is." After saying this, Zhao Yu looked at Guoqing and said, "I remember that junior sister Chen Shui gave you a life-saving jade pendant before. Take that jade pendant out and let the tracking bee smell it." Guoqing rolled her eyes at Zhao Yu and took out a beautiful jade pendant from her chest. When Mu Chen Shui was fighting the Wuxia jellyfish, in order to protect the four of them, she gave this jade pendant to Guoqing. She had him protect the three of them and prevent the Wuxia jellyfish from affecting them. Zhao Yu took the jade pendant without any hesitation and placed it in front of the tracking bee. The tracking bee hovered over the jade pendant for a while before buzzing out of the tea house, heading towards the desolate forest in front of the town. "Let's go. We'll follow them." Zhao Yu took a step forward and closely followed the tracing wasp. As for the jade pendant, it was conveniently kept in his sleeve. "Zhao Yu, I say, return junior sister Chen Shui's jade pendant to me first." Guoqing's reaction was not slow as she followed closely behind. Of course, the moment she opened her mouth, she asked Zhao Yu to return the jade pendant. However, the latter acted as if he was deaf and pretended not to hear Guoqing's voice. The group of four left the tea house and did not attract much attention. Perhaps it was because the people in the tea house recognized the uniforms on the four of them. With the position of the inner courtyard in the Divine Spectre realm, there was really no one who dared to offend the inner courtyard core disciples. "Brat, your little lover is in the desolate forest. Why aren't you following them?" Xiao Hei's somewhat teasing words sounded out, causing Zhuowen to nod his head. He quietly left the tea house and closely followed behind Lu Yu and the other three. After walking out of the town, Zhuowen's appearance and figure changed. He turned into a tall middle-aged man with a dark complexion and a single-shoulder leather jacket. At the same time, Zhuowen's own aura was concealed by the 100 transformation divine art, appearing faintly discernible. The attention of Lu Yu and the other three was completely focused on the tracking bee, and naturally did not notice Zhuowen, who was quietly following them. The great desolate forest was indeed as Moyan and Bai Yan had described. Thick and solid black trees grew within it. These black trees were extremely strange. On the surface of the rough tree bark, there were actually beehive-like holes, with strands of black qi spreading out from the holes. This black qi contained a trace of desolation aura. Under the effect of this desolation aura, all living things would gradually wither and fall like withered leaves. Zhuowen was naturally not an exception. The instant he stepped into this desolation aura, Zhuowen felt the skin on the surface of his body continuously wrinkling and coarse, as if he was aging. Furthermore, the life force within his body was gradually draining away. This kind of draining was not due to one's lifespan decreasing with the passage of time. Instead, it was due to some kind of desolation energy that was forcefully stripping away one's life force, causing it to continuously weaken. Zhuowen's eyebrows slightly knitted together. The yuan power within his body surged and circulated, adhering to the surface of his body, resisting this desolation energy. Immediately, The wrinkles on the surface of his body began to disappear, once again becoming smooth and smooth. Not far ahead, Zhao Yu and the other three also circulated their yuan power, adhering it to the surface of their bodies, forming a special yuan power clothing, resisting the corrosion of the desolation energy that was surging towards them. We should try our best to be careful. The desolate beasts in the great desolate forest are not easy to deal with. We should hide as much as possible, and try our best not to clash with them. Zhao Yu softly instructed the Guoqing trio behind him. The trio naturally nodded their heads. Their footsteps were very light, but their speed was not slow. After all, as core disciples of the Sky Capital Peak, their cultivation and strength were not weak. This was naturally an easy task for them. Chapter 13-15. Yiksha Jellyfish, the desolate qi is getting stronger. Everyone be careful. Zhao Yu, who was walking at the front, had a grave expression. At the same time, he controlled the tracing bee to slow down. Zhao Yu, are we not there yet? Guoqing complained. Soon. I can feel that the tracing bee is in a hurry. This is a sign that it is about to find the owner of the scent. Zhao Yu said in a deep voice. Hearing this, Guoqing did not say anything else, and silently followed behind. Around 10 minutes later, a deafening roar of a beast came from the depths of the dense forest. At the same time, there were sounds of fighting. The tracing bee that was leading the way became excited. With a swoosh, it increased its speed and rushed into the dense forest. Found it. Junior sister Chen Shui is probably in front. Zhao Yu's eyes lit up, and he quickly rushed forward. At the same time, he waved his right hand and kept the tracing bee. The four of them carefully moved forward. The beast roar from before was extremely loud and clear. It was probably a powerful desolate beast. They naturally had to be careful. After all, there was still a gap between their strength and Mu Qinshue's. In front of them there was a bush. The four of them hid their auras and hid in the bush. Through the gaps in the bush, they looked at the other side of the bush. They saw that in front of the bush, there was an open space that was neither big nor small. On the open space, there was a strange beast that was several feet in size. The strange beast was shaped like a tiger, and its fur was emitting a metallic luster, as if it was the leader of the Iron and Steel sect. Moreover, there were 2 pairs of black wings on the back of the strange beast. Its body was extremely strong. When it leaped, it turned into an illusory black shadow. It was difficult to see its figure clearly. Its claws slammed into the air, and the power that erupted caused the entire space to shake violently. Its strength was terrifying. At this moment, the powerful desolate beast was like a black lightning bolt, as it launched a brutal attack on a beautiful figure in the open space. It was a beautiful woman. Her skin was as white as snow and her eyes were like clear water. As she looked around, she had an elegant and noble temperament that made people feel ashamed of their inferiority and did not dare to profane her. However, that arrogance and quick-wittedness of hers had a captivating aura that made one unable to help but be captivated. The girl's jade-like feet were bare, and under those sparkling and translucent feet, there was a lush red lotus floating. The fiery red lotus and the girl's snow-white skin made her look extremely holy and pure. At this moment, the woman waved her jade-like hand and thousands of lotus flowers bloomed around her. A mysterious energy exploded. The desolate beasts that were charging over immediately slowed down in this lotus domain. The woman's voice was like an oriole's as she slowly spoke. Her voice was extremely clear, and it resounded in the open space. I've been raising this Shijinhu since it was a cub. It sees me as its parent, and it will naturally do whatever I say. The reason why I'm like a fish in water in the great desolate forest is partly because of this Shijinhu. Hee. The Yiksha jellyfish sneered. Attack. Just as the Yiksha jellyfish finished speaking, 4 figures flew out from the bushes in front of them. The 4 of them were Zhao Yu and the other 3 who had been hiding in the bushes. When the Yiksha jellyfish and Mu Qinshuo were talking, it was the best time to attack. However, just as the 4 of them were about to approach the Yiksha jellyfish, countless black threads flew out from the Yiksha jellyfish's back and instantly formed a black spider web that enveloped the 4 of them. Not good. Looking at the incoming spiderweb, the four people's expressions greatly changed. They wanted to change their direction, but unfortunately, it was already too late. The spiderweb had already enveloped them. The four of them wanted to break free, but they discovered that the spiderweb was extremely tough. Waves of dark green gas suddenly gushed out from the spider web and enveloped the four of them. Not good, it's poisonous. The moment the dark green gas spread out, Zhao Yu shouted loudly and hurriedly held his breath. However, it was useless because the poisonous gas was able to forcefully enter all the acupuncture points in his body, causing him to be powerless and his face to be as pale as snow. Guo Qing and the other two were in a similar situation. Their bodies were powerless, and their faces were dark green. They had almost lost all of their fighting strength. It was obvious that the poison was quite severe. The Black Widow, who is ranked 11th on the sin list? Zhao Yu's eyes were filled with shock and anger as he involuntarily shouted. Oh, this little brother's reaction is quite fast. You've recognized me so quickly. A bewitching and numbing voice was transmitted from another part of the dense forest. Immediately, a lady in black leather clothes with a figure that was even more voluptuous than Guo Qing swayed her slender waist as she walked over. Her demeanor was extremely enchanting, and her entire body was emitting a bewitching aura. It's really the Black Widow. Guo Qing and the other two were shocked and furious. They did not expect the Black Widow to ambush them here. Black Widow, you've been watching the show until now? The Wuxia jellyfish narrowed its eyes, and its voice became extremely unfriendly. The Black Widow smiled and said, How am I watching the show? I just arrived and rushed here. Wuxia, don't accuse a good person. The Wuxia jellyfish snorted and did not say anything. He did not want to fall out with the Black Widow over this matter. After all, he still needed to work together with the Black Widow to deal with this otherworldly woman. I say, little girl, these four people should be your senior brothers and sisters. If you don't want anything to happen to them, it's best if you give up on resisting, otherwise. The Black Widow slowly arrived beside Zhao Yu's group of four. The 5 fingers of her white right hand suddenly grew 5 sharp nails that were like 5 sharp thorns. They landed on Zhao Yu's face as she spoke in a provocative manner. Mu Qinshua's brows slowly knit together as she softly spat out. Despicable. Haha. I love it when people use the word despicable to describe me. So naturally I am despicable. Then do you want to care about the lives of these 4 people? The Black Widow said this as her 5 fingers slowly slid across Zhao Yu's face. Instantly 5 bloody marks were left on his face. Junior sister Chen Shui, you don't need to care about us. You leave first and go back to inform the Peak Master. If the Peak Master personally comes, I want to see if the Black Widow and the Wuxia jellyfish will still dare to act this arrogant. Although Zhao Yu's face was pale, his courage was not small as he spoke to Mu Qinshu. Yo, little brother is quite loyal, but I hate loyal people the most. So I'm planning to make an example out of you. Hey. The Black Widow's eyes flashed with a cold glow. Her 5 fingers suddenly opened and like a meat grinder, she flew at Zhao Yu's neck, wanting to directly kill him. Zhao Yu's face was pale, but there was not much fear in his eyes. Rather, he was very calm. Let him go. Mu Qinshua's expression slightly changed. Her jade foot stepped off the air, and she stepped onto the red lotus, turning into a red light as she charged at Zhao Yu. However, the Wuxia jellyfish and Shijin, who naturally would not let Mu Qinshu have her way. 1 man and 1 beast, 1 in front and 1 behind, surrounded Mu Qinshu in the middle. A wild whistling sound exploded in the air, and a terrifying wind blew, creating a terrifying storm in the open space. Mu Qinshua's expression slightly changed. She raised her jade hand and flicked the fire-red sword in her hand. Endless flames surged out, turning into 2 fire dragons. 1 in front and 1 behind. They flew out and collided with the Wuxia jellyfish and Shijin. Hong! An extremely terrifying tremor resounded throughout the dense forest. Mu Qinshu was forced to take several steps back, while the Wuxia jellyfish and Shijin were also forced to take over a dozen steps back. The difference in strength between the two was immediately apparent. The four of them had been poisoned by the Black Widow, although their lives weren't in danger because they were Emperor Realm cultivators. They wouldn't be able to use much of their strength. This guy is so domineering. Walking to the edge of a barren tree at the edge of the open space, Guqing angrily said with some dissatisfaction. However, Zhao Yu shook his head and said softly, "This brother is a demonic cultivator. Generally, demonic cultivators are extremely cold and self-centered. This kind of attitude is very normal." At this moment, Mu Qinshua's beautiful eyes also fell on the demonic youth who had suddenly appeared. Her eyes were filled with confusion, doubt, and some emotions. She didn't know why, but the demonic youth in front of her gave her an extremely familiar feeling. Although she had never seen the face of the youth in front of her, that familiar feeling came from the bottom of her heart. It was as if she had known this youth for a long time. "Is it an illusion?" Mu Qinshu muttered in a low voice. Soon after, she was stunned to find that the demonic youth slowly turned his head. That pair of cold black and red eyes stared at Mu Qinshu. Then the two looked at each other. Soon after, Mu Qinshu was stunned to find that the coldness in the demonic youth's eyes was like melting ice and snow, gradually melting away. In those cold eyes, a trace of gentleness appeared for the first time. Even the corners of the youth's mouth rose in a gentle arc. At this moment, a demonic youth who was as cold as a demon revealed such a gentle smile. Mu Qinshu was absent-minded, and her heart was a little chaotic. This guy is looking at junior sister Chen Shui. Damn it. It seems that he saved us because of junior sister Chen Shui. Not far away, Zhao Yu naturally saw this scene and frowned. So he's a lecher, Guqing said in a low voice. He was also somewhat dissatisfied. However, even if the four of them were dissatisfied, they didn't dare to show it. After all, the demonic youth in front of them had saved their lives. They weren't the kind of people who would repay kindness with ingratitude. "Who are you?" Black Widow's voice gradually turned cold. The demonic youth in front of her was only a third-level demon emperor, but she was forced to retreat by him. This made her feel even more embarrassed. After all, she was ranked 11th on the sin list, and her cultivation was also at the 6th-level emperor realm. Her fighting strength was only slightly weaker than the Wuxia jellyfish. Although the fighting strength of a demon emperor was much stronger than an ordinary emperor realm expert, she was 3 levels higher than the demonic youth in front of her. If they were to fight, she would naturally suppress the demonic youth in front of her. "Black Widow, aren't you being too cautious? A mere 3rd-level demon emperor can actually scare you." The Wuxia jellyfish snorted coldly. His face was a little ugly, and his tone was rather impolite. Hearing this, Black Widow's eyes became even more displeased. She said coldly, "Don't worry, he's just a 3rd-level demon emperor. I can still kill him. The result will be the same." After saying that, Black Widow's feet stomped on the ground. Like a bolt of black lightning, she swept straight towards Zhuowen. At the moment when she swept over, Black Widow's fingertips grew out of a few feet long finger blade. The light was piercingly cold and threatening. "Be careful, Black Widow likes to secretly spit out spider webs on her body. Don't be tricked by her." The moment Black Widow moved, Mu Qinshu couldn't help but remind her. When she reacted, a trace of crimson appeared on her face. She didn't know why, but from just now, she had a trace of worry for the demonic youth in front of her. This feeling was very inexplicable. "You still have time to remind others? You'd better take care of yourself first." The Wuxia jellyfish gave a cold snort, and a sharp whistle came from his mouth. Shi Jinhu on the other side gave a roar, and his pair of steel-like wings flapped, quickly flying towards Mu Qinshua's back. The Wuxia jellyfish held his trident and charged at Mu Qinshu without any politeness. Truly a despicable fellow. His cultivation is higher than junior sister Chen Shui's, but he chose to bully her with numbers. Despicable and shameless. Seeing this scene, Guqing blurted out. Her full breasts heaved up and down, forming an alluring arc. The Wuxia jellyfish naturally did not care about Guqing's condemnation. With his personality, he would do anything to achieve his goals. Bullying her with numbers was nothing to him. Mu Qinshu was not afraid at all. Her right hand tightened the flame-red sword, and with a flick, a terrifying flame spread out. It turned into a crescent-shaped flame arc that flew at the Yuxia jellyfish in front of her. At the same time, the red lotus under her feet began to spin. A lotus of fire bloomed on its surface, and it flew at Shijinhu behind her. Hong hong hong. The three of them immediately engaged in a great battle. Terrifying waves of air and pressure spread throughout the entire space, causing the entire forest to tremble. At the same time, the Black Widow on the other side had already closed in on Zhuowen. Her hands slashed out, and a finger blade appeared on her fingertips. It created 10 marks in the air and fiercely surrounded Zhuowen. A sharp tearing sound and a dazzling cold light sounded out at the same time. However, Zhuowen did not reveal much of a strange expression. He slowly raised his head, and the demonic slaughter blade in his hand slashed out, releasing waves of blood energy. Life-breaking destruction. That terrifying blood energy continued to squirm, turning into a giant blood-colored blade shadow. It soared into the sky and broke through the air, slashing down in front of the Black Widow. Pung pung pung. The blade shadow clashed with the finger blade and countless sparks flew out. The Black Widow slightly knit her brows as she found that she could not break through the blade shadow in front of her. You have some ability, but that's all. The gap between you and me is too big. Let's see how you can stop me. The Black Widow licked her lips. Countless black silk threads burst out from the finger blades on her fingertips. These silk threads swept out in a complicated manner, forming a huge spider web, and instantly submerged the blood-colored blade shadow. Looking at the spider web that continued to sweep over, Zhuowen frowned slightly. Endless demonic aura gushed out from his body. The demonic slaughter blade slashed out again, and a secular world intent gushed out. Chaotic secular world. The secular world intent filled the air, causing people to fall into the secular world. Even the Black Widow's eyes began to blur when she felt the secular world intent. However, it was only for a moment. However, this moment was enough. Zhuowen leaped up, raised the demonic slaughter blade above his head, and used the third move, restrain. In the void behind him, the words restrain and restrain appeared. A sealing force shrouded the Black Widow, causing her to freeze on the spot. What kind of blade technique is this? The Black Widow naturally felt that she was unable to move. She shrieked, and a black shadow swept out from between her eyebrows, blocking Zhuowen's attack. Clang! Zhuowen slammed heavily on the black shadow. He felt like he had hit a metal wall. After a burst of sparks, he was thrown back dozens of steps by the recoil. Armor Soul. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and looked at the black shadow. Only then did he notice its true appearance. It was a huge spider with 8 legs. The spider was pitch black and shiny, like a solid black armor. On the abdomen of the spider, there were dense black hairs. It looked disgusting. Be careful. This is the Black Widow's armor soul, the 8-legged venomous spider. Its entire body is covered in poison. If a mid-level martial emperor is poisoned, he will be powerless and at the mercy of others. Zhao Yu reminded loudly from behind. Zhuowen nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the 8-legged venomous spider. He took a step forward, and demonic aura gushed out. The demonic slaughter blade slashed out again, and a huge blade shadow came down from the sky. Hiss! Chapter 13:17. 10 Evil's ultimate kill. The speed of the 8-legged poisonous spider was very fast. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of Zhuowen. Its 8 legs were like steel as they ruthlessly smashed towards Zhuowen, with the intention of completely crushing him. Bang! The slaughtering devil blade slashed down and heavily smashed onto one of the legs. Soon after, Zhuowen was shocked to discover that the joints of the 8-legged poisonous spider were extremely hard. It was as if he had slashed onto a metal pillar instead of a leg. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. At the same time, the other 7 legs of the 8-legged poisonous spider rushed over and sealed off Zhuowen's surroundings from 7 different directions. Zhuowen slightly knitted his brows. He took a step and twisted his waist, causing a powerful demonic wind to sweep up around him. Subsequently, the slaughtering devil blade swayed along with his body and slashed out horizontally. It continuously smashed onto the 7 legs that were rushing over, causing the sound of metal clashing to ring out continuously. 7 powerful forces were transmitted over, causing Zhuo Wen to let out a muffled groan. However, he relied on these 7 rebounding forces to take a step back and explosively retreat. Swoosh! The 8-legged poisonous spider was extremely cunning. The instant Zhuo Wen retreated, it suddenly spat out a jet of dark green venom from its mouth. It directly enveloped Zhuo Wen. This venom was extremely corrosive, causing wisps of white smoke to be emitted in the air. It looked extremely terrifying. 9 flames karmic fire. Zhuo Wen's eyes narrowed as waves of 9 colored flames gushed out from his body. The surrounding air immediately became extremely hot. The venom that was sprayed onto the surface of the 9 colored flames immediately emitted a hissing sound. It was actually burned into nothingness by the intense heat. What kind of flame is this? Why is the temperature so high? The Black Widow's beautiful eyes narrowed as she stared at the 9 types of flames that surrounded Zhuo Wen in shock. The 8-legged poisonous spider also stared at the 9 flames karmic fire with some fear. The 9 flames karmic fire was the heavenly fire that was formed by the fusion of 9 types of earth fire. Although its power might not be comparable to the heavenly fire that was born in the world, it was much more powerful than the earth fire. The 8-legged poisonous spider was originally a species that was more afraid of fire. Therefore, after seeing the heavenly fire, it was a little afraid. Looking at the appearance of the 8-legged poisonous spider, Zhuo Wen's eyes brightened. He immediately waved his sleeve, and the Buddha's Buddha eye that was hidden on his body immediately appeared. It was Zhuo Wen's Buddha avatar that was covered in golden light. As soon as the Buddhist avatar appeared, he took a step forward and leaped onto the 8-legged venomous spider's body with the 9 flames karmic fire. He threw a punch, and the terrifying 9 flames karmic fire exploded and smashed heavily onto the 8-legged venomous spider. Awa! The 9 flames karmic fire seemed to be a natural counter to the 8-legged poison spider. The right fist that was wrapped in flames smashed onto the surface of the 8-legged poison spider's body and directly penetrated the hard carapace on the back of the spider. Green blood surged out and splashed onto Zhuo Wen's face. What? External avatar? Black Widow clearly did not expect Zhuo Wen to have a Buddha avatar. She could not help but exclaim, "You don't have time to be surprised." A cold voice was heard. Immediately, demonic Zhuo Wen appeared in front of Black Widow and slashed out with his saber. Demonic chi filled the sky. Black Widow hastily parried. 10-finger blades danced in her hands, drawing out extremely strange traces as they slammed into the slaughtering demonic blade. However, because demonic Dao Zhuo Wen had taken the initiative, Black Widow was forced back several steps. Of course, demonic Dao Zhuo Wen was forced back several steps. After all, there was a difference of 3 small realms between the two. Even though demonic Zhuo Wen was a demon emperor with terrifying combat strength, it could not make up for the huge difference in realms. I think you're courting death. Black Widow was furious. She was a 6th-level emperor realm expert. Even though she was a demon emperor, she actually suffered a loss in the hands of a 3rd-level emperor realm expert. To her, this was an absolute humiliation. Therefore, Black Widow did not hold back anymore. 10 Evil's ultimate kill. The Black Widow let out a low bellow and leaped up. The finger blades on her 10 fingers left her hands and turned into 10 thin black blades that were several feet long. A terrifying baleful aura gushed out from the thin black blades, causing the pressure in the entire place to become extremely dense. It was as if many mountains were crushing down. The 10 thin black sabers revolved around Zhuo Wen. Ominous chi filled the sky. The terrifying ominous chi formed terrifying saber shadows. With Zhuo Wen as the epicenter, the ominous chi filled the area around Zhuo Wen. The black saber shadows were like black clouds and dyed the area around Zhuo Wen dark. Swoosh! Black Widow was like a ghost in the billowing ominous chi. Her speed was so fast that even Zhuo Wen could not see her clearly. Bang! Suddenly, there was a piercing sound behind him. What followed was the sharp sound of the air being torn apart. It was as if a peerless sword had sliced through the void. Zhuo Wen stomped his foot, and the demonic slaughtering blade in his right hand spun, before slashing behind him. With a ding sound, he could feel an extremely heavy metal clashing sound being emitted from the demonic slaughtering blade. which was accompanied by numerous sparks shooting out. Dang! Dang! Under this rebounding force, Zhuowen could not help but take a few steps back. Soon after, he saw that the Black Widow was coldly looking down at him with a thin black blade in her hand. Die! Zhuowen shouted coldly, and slashed out with the demonic slaughtering blade once again. Billowing demonic chi rolled out. However, the Black Widow only sneered. The moment the demonic slaughtering blade slashed in front of her, the surrounding 10 thin black blades, that were filled with baleful chi, shot out one after another, and bombarded the demonic slaughtering blade, causing Zhuowen to continuously retreat. 10 evils kill, I'm the king. In here, I'm the absolute king. You will die without a doubt. Black Widow sneered. Her figure was like lightning as she entered the ominous chi saber shadows. When she reappeared, she was standing behind Zhuowen. Her thin black saber pierced towards Zhuowen's black heart. Zhuowen was resisting the attacks of the 10 thin sabers in front of him. He did not expect Black Widow to come from behind. Caught off guard, the thin black saber pierced through his shoulder. Fresh blood spurted out and dyed Zhuowen's hair and collar red. Swoosh! Swoosh! Black Widow was extremely cunning. With the help of the 10 evils kill, she constantly moved around. If Zhuowen showed any flaws, she would attack without hesitation. The thin black saber in her hand was like a venomous snake. Every time, it would leave terrible injuries on Zhuowen's body. Fortunately, Zhuowen's reaction was fast enough. Every time, he would avoid being hit in a vital spot. He only suffered light injuries. However, he also knew that if this continued, he would definitely be exhausted to death by Black Widow. It's over. This is Black Widow's 10 evils kill. This demonic youth is in danger. Not far away, the expressions of Zhao Yu and the other three were ugly. Through the baleful aura, they could clearly see that Zhuowen was being led by the nose by the Black Widow. Injuries continuously appeared on his body as fresh blood flowed, giving him an extremely miserable appearance. If you want to fight, then let's fight to our heart's content. Demonic Zhuowen took a deep breath. His gaze was still cold and emotionless. He indifferently looked at Black Widow, who was glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. His eyes slightly narrowed as his body began to circulate the demon battle art. Boom! Zhuowen's feet shot out like a cannonball. Under his feet, he fearlessly faced Black Widow. You're courting death. Black Widow sneered. She controlled 10 thin black blades and encircled Zhuowen. At the same time, she followed behind the thin black blades like a ghost, quietly waiting for an opportunity to strike. Chapter 13:18. 9 firmaments. A blood-curdling scream rang out. Unknowingly, Black Widow's right hand had blocked the space between his eyebrows. The demonic slaughtering blade swept past, and his right arm was directly cut off. Zhuowen frowned slightly. His right hand formed a palm and suddenly blasted out, heavily smashing onto the Black Widow's abdomen. A terrifying force of impact transmitted over, causing the Black Widow to spit out a mouthful of blood and be sent flying. She heavily smashed onto the ground, causing dust to fill the air. A large crater had actually been smashed out. Bang! The instant the Black Widow was sent flying, another figure was sent flying and landed not far from the Black Widow. At a glance, the figure that was sent flying was the Yiksha jellyfish that was fighting Mu Qinshui. Obviously, the Yiksha jellyfish was no match for Mu Qinshui and was defeated. Not long after the Yiksha jellyfish was repelled, Zhuowen from Buddhism waved his right hand, and the 9 flames karmic fire gushed out. The 8-legged poisonous spider shrieked, and turned into a black light that drilled into Black Widow's forehead. Damn it, who are you? The Yiksha jellyfish helped Black Widow up, and stared at Zhuowen from demonic Dao. Zhuowen ignored the Yiksha jellyfish. He stepped out and used the abstinence seal. A restrictive force froze the two of them in place. Not far away, Mu Qinshui shot over in tacit understanding. With a flick of her finger, the red lotus beneath her feet split into a petal, forming a flaming chain that bound the Yiksha jellyfish and the Black Widow. Whoosh! After doing this, Mu Qinshui pushed off the ground and arrived beside Zhao Yu and the other three. After checking that the poison in their bodies was not too deep, The worry in her beautiful eyes lessened significantly. This is an antidote. Take it, and it should be able to remove the poison in your bodies. After saying this, Mu Qinxue waved her hand and took out a jade bottle. She handed it to Zhao Yu and the others. After doing all this, a pair of watery eyes fell on Zhuowen. She said indifferently, "Young master, thank you for your help this time. I wonder if you can tell me your name?" Zhuowen was startled and immediately remembered that he had used the 100 transformation technique to change his appearance. He gradually felt relieved. After all, the 100 transformation technique not only changed his appearance, but also his aura. No wonder Mu Qinxue did not recognize him. "How is the cold poison in your body?" Zhuowen walked slowly toward Mu Qinxue and asked with a smile. Boom! However, when Zhuowen had just taken a few steps, a light ball fell in front of his feet. Mu Qinxue stared at Zhuowen with a frosty face and said in a deep voice, "How do you know this? Who are you?" At this moment, Mu Qinxue was shocked and angry. There were not many people who knew about the cold poison in her body. Other than Elder Qiu and the sect master of the Burning Heaven sect, only Zhuowen, who she thought about day and night, knew about it. However, she did not know this demonic youth in front of her. She had never even seen him before. How could Mu Qinxue not be shocked or angry when he knew about the cold poison in her body? Zhuowen faintly smiled. Just as he was about to speak, his expression abruptly changed. Not only him, but Mu Qinxue's frosty expression also changed slightly. Whoosh! Soon after, the two of them abruptly retreated to the sides. The instant they retreated, the ground where they were originally standing began to squirm. Soon after, a terrifying tremor was felt. Then a huge palm soared into the sky from below. What is this thing? Zhao Yu and the other three's faces changed slightly as they looked at the huge palm in astonishment. As soon as the inexplicable palm appeared, it swept towards the Yiksha jellyfish and the Black Widow. Then it grabbed them in the palm and extended it into the sky. Zhuowen raised his head. Soon after, he saw a figure slowly walking over from above the giant hand. It was a rather young man. There was a black symbol between his brows. His face was extremely white, making him look rather strange. TSK, Yiksha jellyfish and the Black Widow. How did you two end up like this? You're really pitiful. The young man jumped onto the huge palm. His eyes fell on the Yiksha jellyfish and the Black Widow, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of mockery. Jiu Xiao, how did you appear here? Looking at the evil youth in front of him, the Yiksha jellyfish's eyes were slightly unnatural as he asked indifferently, "I just happened to pass by." Jiu Xiao smiled faintly. Then, his eyes fell on Mu Qinxue below. His eyes revealed a touch of surprise, but he smiled and said, "What an elegant and refined beauty. I've never seen such a beauty before. Beauty, why don't you follow me? I, Jiu Xiao, will let you enjoy the blessings of a man." Hee. Jiu Xiao's words were very presumptuous, and there was even a trace of frivolity in them. This made her frown slightly, and her eyes became even colder. This guy is called Jiu Xiao. Could it be that Jiu Xiao, who is ranked 9th on the evil rankings? I heard that Jiu Xiao commits all kinds of evil, and is extremely lecherous. What he likes to do the most is rape and pillage. In the divine nether realm, he's an existence that makes people tremble in fear. Zhao Yu's face was a little ugly as he said. Jiu Xiao chuckled and licked his lips. He stared at Mu Qinxue and said, "Beauty, isn't my suggestion good? Follow me, and I'll let you enjoy the best feeling in the world." Hee. Nothing good comes out of a dog's mouth. Shut your dog's mouth. A cold voice sounded, causing Jiu Xiao's face to stiffen. Mu Qinxue waved her jade-like hand, and a gentle energy was released, pushing Zhao Yu, Guiqing, and the others several meters away. Then she stumbled down on one knee, and her face became even more pale. Waves of black cold aura came out of her body's acupuncture points. This black cold aura was very strange, as if there was nothing in the world that could not be frozen by it. When the black cold aura was released, the surrounding air seemed to freeze, and the ground was covered in a layer of black frost. What's wrong with junior sister Chen Shui? Why is there such a terrifying cold aura coming from her body? Guoqing stabilized herself, and her beautiful eyes stared right at Mu Chenxue in front of her. She couldn't help calling out in a low voice. Zhao Yu's face was a bit ugly as he said with a frown. This cold aura is so terrifying. That demonic youth mentioned cold poison before. Could junior sister Chen Shui really have the so-called cold poison? Zhao Yu, do you have a way to save junior sister Chen Shui? Guoqing suddenly said to Zhao Yu. Zhao Yu shook his head with a bitter smile and said, this cold poison is too terrifying. We can't even approach it, not to mention saving junior sister Chen Shui. Then what do we do? Guoqing's heart was in chaos as she did not know what to do. Jiao Xiao, who was originally trapped in the 9-leaf bewitching lotus, naturally noticed Mu Chenxue's abnormality. Soon after, he was pleasantly surprised to discover that the power of the 9-leaf bewitching lotus was gradually weakening. It seems like the heavens are helping me. Little beauty, you are destined to be mine. Jiao Xiao gave a long laugh. With a wave of his sleeve, the 9 heavens around him released a terrifying power, attacking the 9 petals around him. Under this kind of attack, the 9-petal lotus began to sway, even teetering on the verge of collapse. Seeing this scene, Jiao Xiao became even more excited. He continued to attack, wanting to use brute force to break the 9-petal lotus. The cold poison is acting up ahead of time? Zhuo Wen, who was originally fighting with the Yuxia jellyfish and the Black Widow, naturally noticed Mu Chenxue, who was surrounded by black cold energy, and his expression changed greatly. There were still 2 months before the 3 years, but at this moment, Mu Chenxue's cold poison was acting up 2 months ahead of time. This caused Zhuowen's mood to sink to the bottom. Scram! Demonic Zhuowen roared and slashed out with the slaughtering demon blade, wanting to block Black Widow and the Yuxia jellyfish. You want us to scram? What right do you have? Yuxia jellyfish and Black Widow sneered and used their strongest attacks. They heavily slammed onto demonic Zhuowen, causing him to groan and retreat dozens of steps. A mere 4th heaven demon emperor wants to fight against us 2 6th heaven emperors. You really don't know what death is. After repelling demonic Zhuowen, Black Widow did not hold back and mocked him. Her words were full of ridicule. Both of you have to die. Zhuowen slowly raised his head. Unknowingly, he was holding a black ball in his hand. This ball was filled with extremely terrifying demonic qi. This black sphere was the demon source of the extreme demon lord. When Zhuowen had obtained this demon source, the extreme demon lord had advised him to wait until he reached the 6th layer demon emperor realm before using this demon source. At that time, he would be able to reach the 7th layer demon emperor realm, and his battle prowess would be monstrous. Thus, Zhuowen had not used it before. But now, he could sense that his main body was still some distance away, and Mu Chenxue's cold poison was acting up. He could not just stand by and watch. Therefore, he did not hesitate to take out the demon source. What is this thing? Black Widow and the Yuxia jellyfish naturally saw the black ball in Zhuowen's hand. They could feel the extremely dense and terrifying demon source in the black ball. Their eyes were filled with shock. Gotcha! Zhuowen directly crushed the black ball. Then, the demonic origin within the black ball burst out, wrapping Zhuowen's entire body. It was as if an extremely terrifying existence was being nurtured within it. Boom! A thick demonic light soared into the sky from the demonic qi. It pierced through the horizon and scattered the clouds. In the terrifying demonic light, a slender figure walked over step by step. His footsteps contained demonic sounds as he walked over. Black Widow and the Yuxia jellyfish looked at this figure with fear in their eyes. At this moment, demonic Zhuowen's aura was too majestic. It was much stronger than before. Die! The moment Zhuowen walked out of the demonic light, he only spat out this word. Then his entire body was like a black bolt of lightning. He rushed in front of Black Widow and the Yuxia jellyfish, and gently slashed out with the slaughtering demonic blade. Block! The Yuxia jellyfish roared and raised his trident to block in front of him. As for Black Widow, she naturally took out 10 finger blades and placed them in front of her. Bang! The slaughtering demonic blade hit the trident and the 10-finger blades. It was just an ordinary slash without any fancy moves. Then the trident and the finger blades were directly shattered. The remaining force of the slash did not diminish and instantly reached Black Widow's neck. With a miserable shriek, the Black Widow's head was directly chopped off by the blade. The Wuxia jellyfish's reaction was a bit faster. It immediately flew backwards and dodged the sure-kill blade. However, its condition was not good. It was gasping for breath, and its face was pale. Blood flowed out from the corner of its mouth. It appeared to be extremely weak. Zhuowen waved his right hand and grabbed Black Widow's nascent soul. Then, he immediately stuffed it into his spiritual ring without any hesitation. So terrifying. The Wuxia jellyfish's eyes were filled with fear. He screamed and actually wanted to escape. However, how could Zhuowen let him go? Whoosh! Zhuowen took a step forward and caught up with the Wuxia jellyfish. Then, he slashed out again with an ordinary slash. The demonic blade stirred up a violent wind. No! Feeling the terrifying slash behind him, the Wuxia jellyfish screamed and blocked it with his hand. However, Demon Zhuowen's strength had skyrocketed after absorbing the demon origin of Grand Demon Lord. His cultivation had risen to the 5th Heaven Demon Emperor. His battle strength had increased by more than just a little. Slash! In an instant, the Wuxia jellyfish was cut into two by Demon Zhuowen's slash. Blood rained down from the sky. It was an extremely terrifying scene. As soon as the Wuxia jellyfish died, his nascent soul was naturally not spared. It was stored in Zhuowen's spirit ring. Back then, Cheng Huang had said that the nascent soul of an Emperor Realm warrior could be used to refine elixirs. Naturally, he would not destroy it. So strong. Zhao Yu and the others naturally also noticed the battle on Demon Zhuowen's side. When they saw Black Widow and the Wuxia jellyfish being killed by Zhuowen, their eyes were filled with surprise. Boom! At this moment, Jiu Shao, who was originally trapped by the 9-leaf mystifying lotus, finally broke free. Like a hungry wolf, he rushed towards Mu Qinxue. You're courting death. Zhuowen of the demonic path roared angrily. He rushed in front of Jiu Shao and slashed out with his blade. Suddenly, a terrifying demonic aura gushed out and split into countless blade shadows, enveloping Jiu Shao's entire being. Looks like you've used a secret technique to increase your strength. However, you're still not enough in front of me. 9 firmaments coldly snorted. With a wave of his right hand, 9 clouds shot out. These clouds were very strange, as if they possessed elasticity. When Zhuowen's blade landed on them, he was shocked to discover that the clouds first caved in, then protruded out. Between these bumps, there was actually a powerful rebound force. Thud! Thud! Demon Zhuowen frowned slightly and took a few steps back. He stared coldly at Jiu Shao in front of him and said, "Even if you're a 7th-level Emperor Realm warrior, I'll still kill you." As he spoke, Demon Zhuowen's aura soared again. Under the effect of the devil origin, it continued to rise. Finally, with a boom, his cultivation broke through to the 6th-level Demon Emperor Realm. Chapter 1320. Here I come. On the other side, the death of the Wuxia jellyfish had a big impact on Shi Jinhu. Shi Jinhu let out a mournful cry and actually abandoned Zhuo, of the Buddhist Tao, and rushed towards Zhuo, of the demonic Tao. Whoosh! Shi Jinhu was extremely fast. In an instant he was in front of Zhuowen. A pair of huge tiger claws slammed down from the sky, landing heavily on Zhuowen's face. The moment Shi Jinhu attacked, Jiu Shao also made his move. He waved his hands, and 9 clouds spread out, turning into 9 black shadows. They attacked Zhuowen of the demonic Tao from 9 directions. Life restraining. Zhuowen of the demonic Tao swung his right hand, and the power of confinement spread out around his body. Shi Jinhu, who was originally rushing towards him, suddenly froze when he was about 10 feet away from Zhuowen. Life-breaking. The moment Shi Jinhu's figure froze, Zhuowen attacked. The demonic slaughter blade swept past Shi Jinhu's lower abdomen at a tricky angle, bringing with it an extremely mournful spray of blood that splashed out. Owa! Shi Jinhu let out a blood-curdling scream as he fell from the sky and crashed heavily into the ground. Blood continuously flowed out from his lower abdomen, almost forming a small pool. Shi Jinhu's aura also gradually weakened. After killing Shi Jinhu, Zhuowen of the demonic Tao did not let down his guard, because Jiu Zhao's attacks were coming one after another. The 9 clouds were extremely difficult to deal with. Bang! 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 Zhuowen of the demonic Tao slashed out again and again, but found that the 9 clouds were extremely tough. When the blade slashed on the surface, there was a surge of elasticity, and it was impossible to break through the 9 clouds. Haha, it's useless. These 9 clouds are my armor soul. Not only can it increase my speed, but it also has the effect of reflecting attacks. Even a 6th level demon emperor would find it difficult to break through my 9 clouds. Jiu Xiao stood above the clouds, looking down at Zhuowen of the demonic Tao with a sneer. Reflecting power? As long as my power exceeds the limits of what the clouds can bear, then these clouds will naturally break. Zhuowen of the demonic Tao suddenly stopped and looked up at Jiu Xiao in the sky with an inexplicable smile. Seeing the smile on Zhuowen of the demonic Tao's mouth, Jiu Zhao's eyes narrowed, and a trace of surprise arose in his heart, but that quickly turned into horror. This was because he found that a terrifying force, he was Jiu Xiao of the demonic Tao sect, was. When he turned his head and looked into the distance, he immediately discovered that a figure was flying over at an extremely fast speed from the horizon. It was clearly 1,000 kilometers away a moment ago, but it was already very close at this moment. Boom! Who are you? Jiu Xiao was sent flying. He looked back with difficulty in the air, and stared at Zhuowen in front of him as he muttered to himself. Zhuowen stood in the air and looked down at Jiu Xiao. He did not speak. He only stretched out his right hand and said indifferently, "Go to hell and ask the King of Hell. For kill formation destroy." As soon as he finished speaking, the killing power of the 4 kill formation rushed into Jiu Zhao's body. His eyes bulged out, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was directly crushed by the killing power. Countless clouds of blood splattered in the air, and only his head was left. This fellow is so strong. The moment Jiu Xiao was killed, Zhao Yu's group of 4 not far away opened their mouths and spat out these words with difficulty. Moreover, they could tell that the demonic youth and the Buddhist youth were most likely clones of the black-robed youth that had suddenly appeared in front of them. After all, the demonic youth had directly integrated into the black-robed youth's body, multiplying his battle strength to an extremely terrifying level. Puchi! Suddenly, not far away, Mu Qinxue, who was kneeling on one knee, spat out a mouthful of black blood. Her face was filled with strands of black energy, looking very strange. The black energy contained a terrifying cold energy. This cold energy was enough to penetrate one's bones, making one feel cold. Mu Qinshue's consciousness also became a bit blurry. This is bad, junior sister Qinshue. Zhao Yu's group of 4 were all shocked by the movements on Mu Qinshue's side. They all revealed looks of shock, but the cold energy around Mu Qinshue was too terrifying. The 4 of them could not get close at all. Swoosh! Zhuowen took a step forward and stared at Mu Qinshue, whose body was filled with cold poison. His heart was filled with worry. Kid, hurry up and use the heavenly fire to suppress the cold poison in this little girl's body. Otherwise, it will be difficult to deal with her. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Taking a deep breath, Zhuowen waved his right hand, and the Buddha's clone not far away immediately entered his body. Then he walked step by step towards Mu Qinshue, his footsteps unwavering. Perhaps it was because she heard the footsteps, but Mu Qinshue, who was originally a bit blurry, said in a deep voice, "Don't come near me. This cold poison is not something you can fight against." However, the footsteps did not stop because of Mu Qinshue's words. He continued to walk forward step by step. Mu Qinshue raised her head with difficulty. Her eyebrows knitted slightly on her charming face that was shrouded in black qi. Then, her beautiful eyes fell on the figure in front of her. Because she had been resisting the cold poison all along, she did not see the battle between Zhuowen and 9 firmaments. When her gaze finally fell on Zhuowen's face, her delicate body suddenly trembled. Chapter 1321. Cold poison. Quietly feeling the woman leaning on his shoulder, Zhuowen gently caressed Mu Qinshue's soft hair and smelled the elegant fragrance. Zhuowen felt exceptionally peaceful. Mu Qinshue had a very unique temperament. Perhaps from afar, she looked as cold as ice, giving off a sense of alienation that kept others at a distance. However, when one truly came into contact with her heart, Zhuowen discovered that the cold woman in front of him actually had a very gentle heart. This invisible delicate feeling made Zhuowen feel a trace of pity in his heart. Therefore, he gently caressed Mu Qinshue's beautiful hair, as if he was using this method to comfort her. Zhuowen, the cold poison in my body. Mu Qinshu seemed to have discovered something. She suddenly lifted her head and distanced herself from Zhuowen. This was because she discovered that Zhuowen's shoulder was also infected with the black cold poison. However, Zhuowen was very domineering. He grabbed Mu Qinshue's arm and pulled her into his embrace with a little force. He said gently, I have the heavenly fire 9 flames karmic fire in my body. The cold poison will not cause any harm to me. Don't worry. As he spoke, Zhuowen gently squeezed Mu Qinshue's hand with his right hand. Wisps of 9 colored flames turned into threads and entered Mu Qinshue's body. They followed the meridians in her arm and entered her dantian. The moment the heavenly fire 9 flames karmic fire entered Mu Qinshue's meridians, Zhuowen frowned slightly. He discovered that the dark cold poison that was originally hidden in Mu Qinshue's dantian had completely gone berserk at this moment. It was like a snowstorm that was rampaging through the 8 extraordinary meridians in her body. In fact, Zhuowen could sense that he simply could not imagine how Mu Qinshu would be able to endure the cold poison that had already spread throughout her meridians. She was even able to appear so calm. Looking at the beautiful woman in front of him with a smile on her face, Zhuowen felt even more pity for her. He sighed and said, Actually, when you were fighting with the Yiksha jellyfish, the cold poison in your body had already acted up, right? Why are you so foolish? Do you still want to continue fighting? Mu Qinshue's meridians were almost completely permeated by the cold poison. This was not something that could be done in a short period of time. It would take a certain amount of time for the cold poison to seep into her meridians. If it wasn't for Mu Qinshue's powerful cultivation, she would have been dead by now. Even so, Mu Qinshue's current situation was not good. Mu Qinshu looked straight at Zhuowen, smiled sweetly and said, Don't I have you now? Didn't you bring the heavenly fire over? I always believed that you would do as you said. I always believed in you. Looking at the resolute beautiful woman in front of him, Zhuowen's heart was suddenly touched. He also did not expect that Mu Qinshu would actually believe in him so much. Moreover, it was an unconditional trust. In Zhuowen's opinion, this was an extremely foolish way of doing things. However, it touched Zhuowen's heart. He said softly, What if I didn't come? Or if I came late? Would you still believe in me? Mu Qinshu raised her head slightly, looked at Zhuowen with an extremely serious expression, and shook her head saying, I believe that you won't. Then you will definitely be able to make it here. Zhuowen's eyes moved slightly, and he sighed softly saying, You're really stupid, really stupid. Let me help you suppress the cold poison in your body first. The dark cold poison has already spread throughout your meridians. If you want to completely expel it, I'm afraid it will take a lot of time. Okay. Mu Qinshu nodded gently and did not reject Zhuowen. However, her face quickly turned red, and a rare bashful look appeared in her beautiful eyes. This was because at this moment, Zhuowen was rather domineeringly holding her hands in his palm. Soon after, she felt a wave of blazing heat pass through her arms from Zhuowen's palm and into her 8 extraordinary meridians. She knew that it was caused by the heavenly fire in Zhuowen's body. Moreover, she realized that as the energy of the heavenly fire passed through her meridians and circulated throughout her body, the bone-chilling cold in her body was also alleviated. Her pale face gradually became a little rosy. However, she still felt powerless. After all, Zhuowen was only suppressing the cold poison in her body and did not expel it at all. Most of her strength was suppressed by the cold poison, and she could not display much of her strength. After all, the energy produced by the cold poison was too terrifying. If the cold poison was not completely expelled, it would be very difficult for Mu Chenxue to recover her strength. Hey, who exactly are you? At this moment, Zhao Yu and the other three had also arrived beside the two. Among them, Zhao Yu looked at Zhuowen holding Mu Chenxue's hands in extreme displeasure. Although Mu Chenxue had only entered the inner academy for less than a year, no matter if it was her appearance or aura, she could be counted on one hand in the entire inner academy, or even in the divine nether realm. Many direct disciples of the inner academy had once thrown an olive branch at Mu Chenxue. However, they had all been decisively rejected. This was also how her nickname of the Ice Beauty had come about. In the eyes of many disciples of the inner academy, Mu Chenxue's character was icy cold, and she seemed to reject everyone and everything. Although she had many suitors, there were very few who dared to approach her. Only the direct disciples of the 9 Peaks who were powerful would pester her.